Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 133 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame, and I'm joined, as always, by the intrepid traveler himself, Paul London. Wait, no, it's Matt Forresty. But Matt, as I understand, as I know for a fact, inside sources have told me you have done some traveling yet again. You've done it again, my boy.
Yes, I have done it again. I peed on the floor. No, oh wait, that's not what you're talking about. Yes, I went to All In London, and I did that for a second time because my life is sad. No, it was wonderful, and I feel like, given a special episode that we have coming up, I feel like it was done as research and live reporting for this podcast. And you'll all find out what that means in a couple months.
And that means you can write it off on your taxes, obviously. So,
yes,
if anyone from the IRS is listening,
you could definitely write off on your taxes a trip for a hobbyist podcast in which no commerce is done.
Matt, I think now, I was just thinking, I think you have been in more, you've attended more special events in Bryan Danielson's life than many close members of my family have attended for my life. Like, I thought you were going to say, you might be a bigger, richer part of his life.
I thought you were going to say I attended more special events in his life than he has.
You were like, all those Lamaze classes Brian couldn't attend, I was watching.
Like I said, research for the podcast. That's all it was. I feel like I should save some of these thoughts, though, for something special that's coming up soon that we will announce in due time. Our dear Dane Trombozos. Will be
when we kidnap Bryan Danielson.
Oh, no.
Subjective to a 9-hour interview that will also be evidence at our trial.
No, because then if he gets kidnapped, they're going to blame us. Don't say it.
Someone broke into his house once and he fought them off, so I think, could you imagine if we broke into Bryan Danielson's house?
I feel like you're saying a lot of alarming things that I don't want any part of, Trevor.
For the record, I've never broken into anyone's house. I've had my house broken into. It is not fun, although
traveling to go to big matches of his feels stalkery enough to me. I don't think you need to add on to actual stalking.
Fun fact, I will say though, if you go, this was a silver lining as a child. Fun fact: if your family has homeowners insurance that covers robbery, and all your video game console and all your games get stolen, you get to pick brand new games. You don't have to buy the same games, which blew my mind as a little child. I was like, wow. Those games I didn't like, I get to buy new ones. I was like, Mom, can we get robbed every month? And
so this is a fun fact that you learned as a kid that you are still holding on to with excitement, like 30 years later.
Listeners, I'm just saying, if you are younger and your parents have insurance and you want a new game collection, find a way to encourage people to rob your house.
And Trevor is actually talking to the rest of our 40-year-old listeners who are clearly the ones that play most of the video games.
Yes.
Can you get new wrestling tapes too?
No, unfortunately, that they punish you if you have wrestling tapes. They just dock it. You'd be like, hey, can I get this? What's the value of this VHS recorded pay-per-view of Summers of like Royal Rumble 1995? And they'll be like, that's negative dollars.
What if you also have on the same tape, because you taped on SLP mode? What if you also have the next 4 episodes of Monday Night Raw right after the Royal Rumble on the same tape?
Yeah, it's about $20 then.
Okay.
But yeah, so we get to cover a Ring of Honor show today, and it is I would say it's a fascinating show. This show, Matt, is weird. This one is, as Tony Khan might say, for the sickos. The show we're covering tonight is Battle of the Icons. It took place January 27th, 2007 at the Inman Sports Club in Edison, New Jersey, in front of a reported crowd of 950 fans. First little weird thing, there were 2 dark matches that are not on the DVD, but here's a weird dark match for you, Matt. Way back in the early days of 2007, Shane Hagedorn defeated Michael Elgin in his technically his Ring of Honor debut in 6 minutes and 4 seconds. Obviously, Elgin would become a much bigger part of Ring of Honor years from now. He wouldn't really get to be in Ring of Honor at this point, maybe thankfully, but kind of crazy that all the way back in like early 2007, here he is losing a 6-minute dark match to our friend Shane Hagedorn.
Yeah, that's a cool. It's a cool fact to hang your hat on if you're Shane. And yeah, I think an honor for one Michael Elgin too. That's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're talking about a big time dark match card, because your other dark match on the show was a dark 3-way dance. Roderick Strong defeated Alex Payne and Mitch Franklin in 3:34. So Roderick Strong pulling double duty so he could have a 3.5 minute dark match with I'm sure there's probably a story behind that. But
well, I believe Shane Hagedorn said on an honorable mention back when they reviewed the show that he thinks it was just Roddy wanted to beat someone up on the pre-show, and Gabe was like, "Yeah, fine."
Wow, the privileges of being a top star. But
exactly.
Yeah, I usually listen to the honorable mention shows to prep after I've covered the show, but I didn't quite have time, so I only listened to parts of it because. The spoiler warning for our listeners, I wanted to research grandmothers and see what they had to say about those grandmothers, which we will get to in due time. If you're wondering, grandmothers, what are you talking about? You wait and see.
Well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did that research because I did not. So we clearly covered all the bases between the two of us.
So that was going to be the other name of our show, between the two of us. But we open with new Ring of Honor interviewer Rebecca Bayless backstage interviewing Homicide Jilly Smokes. Smokes looks down Bayless's shirt and flicks his tongue, so great, before he polishes Homicide's ROH World title belt. Homicide is asked how he feels about Samoa Joe, who he is facing tonight. Homicide says friends become enemies once again. Homicide doesn't care if the fans boo or cheer him tonight. He's going to be victorious. Joe then walks into frame all intense. He tells Homicide he's talking to the man who has beaten and crushed him the last time they wrestled. Joe says he just learned something tonight. He's on borrowed time. This might be his last opportunity for the world title, and he's going to take it. Homicide says he loves it. The two greatest wrestlers from the ROH, from the islands, are going to destroy each other, and Homicide's going to be balling tonight. So this is the first, I believe, if you were just watching, the tapes and the video wires, this would be your first, I believe. I don't think there was a tease the night before of that Joe's on his way out.
Yeah, I believe the announcement came maybe right after this.
Yeah, it was on a video wire, I think, that came between when this show happened and the next show. So, yeah, it was very shortly after this.
Yeah, and by the way, did you notice Smokes during this promo looking at Rebecca Bayless's boobs and, like, wiggling his tongue around? Because, in ROH, the future is never now. It's always the past. I don't want to be offended on behalf of Rebecca Bayless, since for all I know that she's known Homicide and Smokes for a long time at this point. Maybe they're all friends. Maybe this is something that she is fine with. Maybe it was even her idea. I have no idea. But it doesn't come across well looking at it in 2024 eyes, and honestly didn't seem great through 2007 eyes either.
It's like the first weekend she's there as a backstage interviewer and she's immediately being sexualized. Yeah, that's not the greatest.
Yeah.
We then join Bobby Cruz in the ring from the fans, who informs us that the throwing of streamers is permitted during tonight's show, but the throwing of toilet paper is not. Except before he could finish that warning, Jimmy Rave's music hits and out Jimmy comes to the ring.
And by the way, reminds me, this is something that was said before every show at this point, which is why we had stopped seeing all the toilet paper getting thrown at Jimmy Rave. Obviously, they had to say something to get that to change. So this is kind of our first inside look at what was said before all the shows in order to change the presentation of Jimmy Rave's entrance.
Battle of the Icons, truly a live show experience on TV. It's just like being there, Matt. So, yeah, Jimmy grabs the mic. He says, as this chump Bobby Cruz was about to say, any moron that throws something into the ring is going to be ejected from the building. He threatens to punch every heckling fan. And then Jimmy picks up a roll of toilet paper that was placed on the apron. I don't remember if he brought it or someone put it there as a prop for him. But he says, ROH was supposed to be about respect, and he's going to bring respect back to Ring of Honor. He talks about the last time they were in New Jersey, Nigel McGuinness tried to make a joke out of him when he threw a roll of toilet paper at Jimmy. So tonight, Jimmy is going to raise the stakes of their I Quit match. He wants it to be no DQ, and he wants the loser to have to this is, and I'll quote Jimmy exactly here, smell and kiss, not just kiss, smell and kiss the feet of the winner. Jimmy ends by saying he doesn't want to wait for later in the night. Let's do it right now. Nigel's music hits. He charges the ring, clotheslines Jimmy. Then he grabs the mic and says he accepts the stipulations, you wanker. And so we now have our opening match, a no disqualification, I Quit, loser must smell and kiss the feet of the winner match. Jimmy Rave defeats Nigel McGuinness in 17 minutes, 34 seconds when the refs stopped the match. Nigel was caught in Jimmy's heel hook, but he refused to submit. So the ref stopped the match for them, which I have plenty of thoughts on. But Matt, what do you think about this match?
Okay, well, it's impossible to talk about this match without the elephant-shaped puddle in the room, which is that about 2/3 of the way through the match, Jimmy Rave just barfed on the mat. I guess he just wasn't feeling well, but what
Actually, I have the story, Matt. I do have the story if you would like me to interject.
Well, before you tell the story.
So
before you tell the story, though, I like to think that it was because he was planning on throwing up after smelling and kissing the feet, and just the throw up came out too early. He had it all set up to go like, oh, this is gross, these gross feet, and then but it just like it was triggered too early. He obviously took whatever was going to induce the vomiting just a little too early. That's what I assume happened, but maybe you'll tell me that I'm wrong.
Believe it or not, Matt, that's a close second place for what it would likely be the answer. But this Jimmy Rave told this story actually on an honorable mention and in his interview with them years back, which is a great source of, again, we always reference this interview because it's one of the few wrestlers from Ring of Honor that's really done interviews that's gone into depth on this kind of part of their career in Ring of Honor. And he says his story is that he says, people thought I was on drugs at the time and that's why it was. But Jimmy says it was actually a case of me not being on drugs. He said he was on an antidepressant at this time, Effexor, I believe is what he said. And he left it at his hotel room 2 days before, so he went 2 days without it. And as people who take antidepressants may know, you can have severe side effects if you stop an antidepressant cold turkey rather than slowly tapering off. And so Jimmy says by the time he got to the building on this night, the room was spinning. I think he said initially he thought he had just eaten bad Chinese food, but in hindsight, he thinks it was this. But he decided to wrestle the match anyway. And you see the end result. So for those who do not watch the match, late in the match, which I'm sure Matt will get to, Jimmy vomits quite a bit. Like, it is very liquidy and it is a lot. Like, this is not just a little bit. This is our boy was staying hydrated before this match, and unfortunately it all came up, Matt.
It's hard to separate the match from that moment. But if I try to, I actually thought this was mostly quite good. Like, the crowd was excited for it. Nigel especially brought a lot of intensity. Jimmy, I think, did pretty well considering what you just said. But also, you could tell that anything he was lacking might have had to do with his physical state. But, basically, Jimmy worked the leg or the ankle. Nigel worked the arm. A lot of arm work in this match. He did that spot that I always love where he bends back on the guy's arm. I actually like all of Nigel's arm submission variations in this match. I think that they all look really painful. I also, enjoyed there's a spot where Nigel escapes a figure four leg lock by hitting Jimmy Rave's knee with a chair. There's just a lot of cool. There's a point where Rave gets from dusk till dawn and takes the mic yelling, "Quit, you son of a bitch," and then calls Nigel a piece of shit. Like, it's fairly visceral. The moment where Jimmy Rave pukes is actually when he gets Nigel in a crossface and Nigel tries to roll out. but Rave holds on, and that's the moment, I guess that whole like room spinning thing after he kind of rolls over but holds on, that's the moment where he just pukes all over the place, and the crowd chants Jimmy puked, which good observation, crowd. I like the idea of the crowds just like chanting things that happened, like Nigel hit the Tower of London. Nigel hit the Tower of London. Nigel hit the Tower of London. Just like chanting things that happened.
What
Um,
if they got super basic, like just a loud chant, "You're both sweating"? Just like, yes, of course.
that's a punch. That's a punch. Um, but anyway, they continued the match, and I would say at this point, it was just hard for me not to look at Jimmy Rave and be like, oh, he's very sick. But he still was working hard and he still, refused to quit when Nigel did that bend back thing I was talking about. He was still rolling out of moves and doing all the spots and kicking Nigel into the rebound and ducking down and grabbing the heel hook. And at the point where the match stops is actually he grabs the heel hook, which has beaten Nigel now multiple times, and Nigel keeps screaming that he won't give up, and he keeps pulling over the ropes, and he ends up getting hung upside down outside the ring, and Rave says he'll break Nigel's ankle, and Nigel says, "You'll have to break it. I'll never respect you, you son of a bitch." And eventually he just gets the match stopped because Nigel wouldn't quit. And the crowd really, really, really doesn't like that. And it's obviously kind of a cop out finish for an I Quit match. Like, why even bother doing that stipulation if you're going to do that finish? But I thought that there was a lot of hard work here. I thought Nigel was great. I think Rave gave an admirable try considering all things considered. So this wasn't their best match and it wasn't a great match, but considering everything that was working against it, I thought it was pretty darn exciting. So I would say this was a good opener, and could have been a great opener maybe if they had, I don't know, maybe not done a different stipulation, and maybe Jimmy Rave was not clearly ill.
We are sympathetic on this one because your thoughts are pretty much exactly mine. For most of the way, I thought this was like a good, straightforward meat and potatoes I Quit match. Like, and why I call it that is like it does exactly what you expect. Like Nigel has a bunch of cool arm submissions, so he laser focuses on Jimmy's arm, and Jimmy's heel hook has been dominating ROH and Nigel specifically, so he focuses on Nigel's leg, and so we get these back and forth periods of momentum where each guys to tap out on each other just using a bunch of submissions. And I felt like they did just enough to justify the no DQ step in terms of like using a chair in a few spots. You mentioned how Nigel used it to break up the figure four. I even just like Nigel doing some of his usual offense, but either focusing it on the arm instead of where he would normally hit it, or including the chair, like how he does the hammerlock body slam, but he does it on the floor in the crowd, which somehow made it more novel to me. Or he does the hammerlock like divorce court of Jimmy's arm, but he does it on open chair in the crowd instead of just on the mat like usual. And then he does just his usual stuff like palm strikes and headbutts, but he does it to Jimmy's arm instead of, his head. And there was even just a couple somewhat novel spots in general, like Nigel at one point European uppercuts Jimmy over the guardrail into the front row, and I've seen a lot of wrestlers hit another wrestler with a move so hard they fly into the front row over the guardrail, but for some reason it being like a European uppercut just kind of tickled me. It kind of made me chuckle in a good way. There's even there's a moment where Nigel tries to do that outside the ring rebound lariat variation where someone tries to throw him back to the ring. He hits the bottom rope and then rebounds back outside the ring into a lariat. But this time Jimmy was waiting and hits him with the spear. Or even something as simple as Jimmy at one point is holding the microphone as he is still applying the crossface. And he's simultaneously holding the mic in front of Nigel's face to get him to, say you quit as he's holding the crossface. I just little things like that are kind of neat. But then, like late in the match, Jimmy vomits, not a little, just two giant wretches of liquid. And as he has Nigel's submission, And like you, from that point on, it becomes hard on me to focus on the match in the ways at least I think they want me to, because Jimmy had been controlling the match at that point, and immediately afterwards, after he pukes, maybe out of necessity, the momentum completely changes to Nigel. Like the vomit is the comeback spot, unfortunately, and you can see the ref checking on Jimmy. Nigel then takes over the match. He just starts beating the crap out of Jimmy. And the problem is, rather than this being some triumphant comeback moment for the babyface, which is Nigel, obviously, like you, I'm now just focused on Jimmy. Like, even knowing after the fact that, this happened years ago and he was fine, you're just watching him with, empathy and concern for oh, how's he feeling right now? How's he getting through this match?
Even the crowd, considering a Northeast wrestling indie crowd, besides the Jimmy puke chant, they were pretty darn polite about everything, about what had just happened, given what you might expect.
Yeah, so maybe it would have is a weird thing. Maybe if it would have worked. I can't believe I'm saying this. If the babyface of this match had puked, it led to the babyface getting beaten down, because at least the sympathy you felt for him, But you know what I mean? The sympathy, real sympathy you felt with him would have been worked as also the sympathy they wanted you to feel for him. But this was supposed to be the comeback near the end of the match for the babyface, and say you're just focused on that poor guy, that poor heel who just vomited his guts out. And it gets distracting in other ways, later on, right when they're doing spots near the large amount of vomit in the ring, you can hear a few fans groan in disgust, just oh god, they're getting close to it. And then the distraction cherry on top of the sundae is as they're doing their finish, you see a guy running to the ring from the back with either a ton of paper towel or rags, and he's literally in the ring cleaning up the vomit as they're doing the finish of the match. It's you couldn't have waited another 30 seconds.
It was Ernie Osiris and Bobby Dempsey, right, who was cleaning it up. But it's kind of funny to me, thinking about it as almost the vomit. It's like when you set up a table and you keep teasing that you're going to go into the table or the thumbtacks or whatever, but instead of thumbtacks, it's a pool of vomit. It's kind of morbidly humorous.
Yeah. And then you have the finish itself, which I'm not a huge fan of. So again, yeah, Nigel gets put in the heel hook, crawls up the ropes, but Jimmy still has it on. And what they do is, not like you said, Nigel gets on they put the mic up to Nigel. He says, I'll never quit. You'll have to break it. Fuck you. I'll never respect you, son of you bitch, I believe is the words he says. And then Jimmy keeps the ankle lock on, and Nigel never quits, but he does scream in pain, no, please don't, and at that point, the ref, Todd Sinclair, decides, I'm going to stop the match, which prompts the fans to chant bullshit. And Bobby Cruz announces that Todd Sinclair stopped the match for the personal well-being of Nigel McGuinness. And I'll say this. I get what the finish is supposed to do. It's supposed to give Jimmy another win in the feud, but delay Nigel's big victory that comes at the end of the feud. Because this is one of those feuds where the heel wins a million times, but then the face gets the final victory, and that's what makes it all worthwhile. But, I can imagine Gabe's thought process was probably, so we're doing another match in this feud, and it has to be a gimmick match because we've done the straight matches without gimmicks too many times, so we need something to jazz it up. So okay, an I quit match, but now I don't want Nigel to have another completely clean victory, so how about we do the Bret Hart Steve Austin WrestleMania 13 finish, where hopefully, in theory, the face looks so tough because they refuse to give up, but the heel technically gets a clean win. They look kind of badass because they just completely dominated the face at the end. But I feel like the Bret Hart Steve Austin version is the exception, not the rule. That is one of the greatest finishes to any wrestling match of all time. But I was wondering your thought. When we do the show, I want to ask your thought. I believe in any gimmick match, not just an I quit match, I believe it should be very rare that the ref stops the match, because I believe there's almost this unspoken thing where if you do a gimmick match, the stakes are higher, and one of the stakes that's higher is we're really going to put pressure that this is going to be a definitive winner. The ref is not going to, when it's a no DQ gimmick match, you kind of don't want the ref to give people an out, even though I get why from a booking standpoint they did. And I feel like that's why fans feel cheated. That's why it's kind of a cheap finish. It's just, but again, I get why Gabe would want to do it this way, but I just very rarely, with the WrestleMania 13 match being the exception, do I feel happy when the ref stops a big gimmick match and you don't get one guy definitively beating the other.
Yeah, I don't know if I actually agree with you honestly on this one. I think that a guy or a woman passing out from a submission hold, I think that is a definitive win in the sense of the person just beat the other person so bad they literally their body would not let them continue. I think that I think that in some ways it's as good as a submission. What I didn't like about this finish is they specifically booked it as an I quit match, where they have the whole gimmick with the microphone and the person has to say I quit into the microphone. And to me, that is kind of promising a dramatic moment where one person humiliates the other in some way. Whereas I think if they had just made this a submission match, which is just the person gives up, but they don't do the whole microphone, I'm saying this audibly gimmick, I think it would make it more palatable to do the passing out from the pain, ref stops the match ending. I like that. That was my beef with the finish. It's like, why do the microphone gimmick if you're not going to actually have that play into the ending? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I actually I didn't think of that, but I think that's a good point where, yeah, with the I quit match, once you bring the mic in, you kind of want to hear someone say I quit into a microphone.
I mean, that's
as
the
weird as
prom.
that
That's the
sounds.
promise. That's the promise of the match. That's like the whole.
Yeah.
That's the whole hook of it.
Yeah, it'd be like seeing like a match where something's on a pole and no one grabs it off the pole.
Although
Vince,
not as bad as the I Quit match at WrestleMania 11 with Bob Backlund and Bret Hart, where instead of saying I quit, Bob Backlund just went "Rawr!" into the mic, and Roddy Piper decided that was I quit.
well, technically that match is still going on. Then it never ended. See, all these matches, you don't say I quit, it's never ended. But
Exactly.
like you, I thought I enjoyed this match despite the weirdness and the end and the finish I didn't like. I still call this like a low very good. I thought this is in a lot of ways is what you want from an I Quit match. It was focused. There were some neat spots, but there was also vomit, unfortunately. But in a way, it's impressive they had a match this enjoyable if Rave was feeling that sick. Because again, he said like on the podcast that like the building was spinning when he got to the building. So if he wrestled the whole match feeling gross, pretty impressive. A couple other spots I just want to get to quickly. I just look at my notes. Like at one point when Nigel has Jimmy in his submission, if you pay close attention, you can see and hear Nigel say, "Bite me" to Jimmy, and Jimmy immediately bites Nigel to break the hold. And I just thought, what a world of pro wrestling where it's the one time you can say "bite me" that's outside of the bedroom, and it's like not a bad thing. Where it's like, no, I earnestly want you to bite me. This is important right now.
Remember when Eric Bischoff tried to make "bite me" like a catchphrase of his during the NWO era?
That's like classic WCW. Like we can't be as edgy as ECW, but it's like. Would bite me work? Is bite me enough? I mean, your agent say that to your mom, she'll be mad. But
if you're a corporate executive like Eric Bischoff was, bite me is very edgy.
I remember as a kid when like Conan would tell people to like peel his potatoes or something. I was like, could I show this in front of my parents or not? I was like, that was like the line for me where I was like, is this something that would piss off my parents or not? To me, that's like the Mendoza line of
although it's funny
peel
to
my
you,
potatoes.
it's funny to you that you think that there were like slang like lewd terms that your parents would know but you didn't.
Like, honey, we haven't peeled each other's potatoes since college. But my parents never went to college. That joke was a lie. I apologize to everybody. But so the other thing I want to mention is
since we were college aged. Kind of a cumbersome way of saying it, but you get the idea.
There was actually a botch here that kind of made me laugh where Jimmy sets up an open chair in the ring and he goes to suplex Nigel. So his leg hits the chair, and instead they completely miss the chair. So it's just a normal vertical suplex, and Jimmy makes up for it where he then does a knee breaker onto the open chair. But that's something that rarely happens, but it's one of my favorite, like, nowadays when botches happen, people just go, oh, this is why the company I don't like sucks. I'm going to give it and blah, blah, blah. I like a heartwarming botch. And to me, there's no more humorous in a good way botch where I get a nice belly laugh out over than when someone does like a spot to an open chair, but they're trying to be safe and they miss the chair. They're like overly safe because it's just so harmless. It's the most harmless of botches, and I enjoy that. Like it's the one time where you're kind of maybe if you're the director taking, you're like, oh, this is a good thing. Maybe this is meant to be. But
you're gonna start a new website, goodbotchamania.com.
heart botches. But after the match, actually that could mean a lot of things in wrestling. But after the match, the fans chant, "You screwed Nigel," as Nigel sells his leg big. He needs to be helped by refs and students. You can overhear a fan ask Todd Sinclair, "How many donuts is Rave paying you to stop the match?" Which it's mean, but kind of funny. The fans chant, "You still suck," at Rave as students continue to work to clean Rave's vomit and disinfect the mat. So I don't know actually if they were chanting that at Rave or if they were chanting that at the students. Like, you're doing a good thing, but you still suck. So Rave gets on the mic and he says, "February 16th, New York City, you're looking at your next world champion." So that's basically him declaring for a title match against Homicide on the next show. And Matt, after all that, the foot smelling and kissing stipulation does not get fulfilled.
Well, like I said, Rave already vomited and killed the climax.
I mean, it's like Chekhov said, if you promise foot smelling and kissing in the first act, someone's got to be sniffing toes in the third act. Either him or Tony Atlas. Someone's.
Well, I know you specifically got really excited when you heard that stipulation. So I'm sorry, Trevor.
I know. I was like Googling, like, did this not make tape? And between my searches this last week, Googling grandmothers and foot, did the foot get smelled? Like, my Google algorithm is pretty crazy now. But
well, come on. You're trying to tell me that's not your normal Google algorithm? Let's cut the facade here, Trevor.
You got me. But moving on to the second match, Adam Pearce, scored to the ring by Shane Hagedorn, defeated Pele Primo via pinfall in 4 minutes, 31 seconds after he hit a pile driver. Sean Radican wrote a review of this after the fact. He was not there live, but he watched it on DVD, and he wrote for this match, Adam Pearce beat Pele Primo. This match went much longer than it needed to, quarter star. It went 4.5 minutes, like much longer. Like, how long did you want this to be? I do not truck for these Pele critics, Matt. We are pro Pele on this podcast.
Of course.
But this match is being taped for ROHvideos.com. It's a squash for Pearce, but Pele actually does get a decent amount of offense here, particularly at the start where he has Pearce on the ropes a bit and he wipes him and Hagedorn out with a big dive to the floor. And I just wrote my notes, like, Pele continues to be fairly over already for a Ring of Honor student. And then Pearce takes over. The crowd spends most of the time from that point on making Repo Man chants as Pearce is still wearing the goggles he had on the night before required because he had just gotten laser eye surgery. In fact, at one point, Pearce even gives the crowd a "what's mine is mine and what's his is mine too." We even get a Barry Darso chant, so the crowd not just, they're going the extra mile, not just doing the Repo Man chant. So overall, this is nothing super memorable. Obviously, I thought it was fairly fun, ROH equivalent of a TV match squash. I'm on the record of being a huge fan of whenever someone wrestles a really small wrestler and clearly takes advantage of the fact that they get to do spots they rarely can do because their opponent is so small. And you can see Pearce do a little of that here. Like, he breaks out a goddamn giant swing, which I imagine he's probably thinking, I can't do that against many people. I'm going to do it tonight. He does a choke slam, and he even just really tosses Pele on a body slam, like just a standard body slam. He's just really taking advantage of, I can really hurt this guy, just throw him across the ring. And I feel like there are probably a lot of disadvantages to being a very small wrestler, but one advantage has got to be that you're probably like a lot of wrestlers' favorite opponent. Like, people can't wait to wrestle you, which I imagine is probably a nice feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And, just like the match the night before, the highlight is Pearce just chucking Pele around, like you said. The body slams, or he just throws him across the ring. And yeah, Pele always does a great job with his little comebacks. And, they obviously have moved on from the era where they're giving Pele surprise wins. How many did he get? Like 2? And they obviously just kind of abandoned that and brought him back to sort of jobber status against someone like Adam Pearce. But yeah, if you just take it as a squash match, it's fun. It's to the point where, like, Pele was kind of tossed around enough that it got Pearce over as a heel, but Pearce and Hagedorn didn't really do anything that heelish other than just kind of like act like assholes. They didn't cheat or do anything behind the ref's back, really. Pearce won cleanly and decisively, but in a squash match, that's what happens usually. The one guy dominates. Some of the other highlights were some of the verbal stuff, like coming down to the ring, Primo announces to the crowd, "Pearce is a dead man," and I was like, I don't think anyone believes him. And then just like the night before when Pierce was trying to explain his goggles, he looks into the camera and says that his goggles give him X-ray vision. So, quote, so I can see that this idiot, pointing to a guy in the crowd, doesn't have any balls. Which, I mean, I guess if that's what you want to use your X-ray vision for, that's fine. Trevor's gonna use it to look through people's shoes, but but either way, both are fine. Anyway, post-match, Hagedorn does. He taunted him with the trophy. I feel like they've been teasing this trophy match for a really long time, and I kept thinking like they're going to do it on the next show, and then they just really haven't.
I don't think they do it till like it's like another 8 or it's something crazy. Like I don't know how long they've been going, but both the Delirious Adam Pearce and the Shane Hagedorn Pele Primo feuds feel like they've been going on for, you could tell me 2 months and I believe you, and you could tell me 2 years and I believe you at this point. Like, I don't even hate it. It's just, it just feels like it's going on a long time. I've had that same feeling.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see. We'll see how it finally concludes.
We then go backstage where the Briscoes looking directly into camera, unlike the weird promo they did the night before where Gabe had multiple acts cut promos looking off to the side. This time they're back to normal, which made me think, oh, maybe this was only a one-show thing. Nope, that'll come back intermittently later. But anyway, Briscoes are talking about how they beat Aries and Strong in 2 straight falls of their best 2 out of 3 falls match last night. Mark says they haven't forgotten what happened between them and the Havana Pitbulls in 2004. They're going to end it tonight. And then Jay says the tag titles will only be a matter of time for them. This was a promo that was literally the 3 bullet points they were probably given by Gabe. Like nothing more, nothing less. Like literally say what you did last night, say what you're doing tonight, say what you're going to do in the future. And they did
very,
that.
very different from Briscoe's promos in the future.
Yeah. 3-way dance is next. Chris Hero, with his manager Larry Sweeney at his side, defeated Christopher Daniels, scored to the ring by Allison Danger, and Claudio Castagnoli in 14 minutes, 1 second when he pinned Castagnoli with I would call it kind of a crucifix. In kayfabe, you'd wonder why this match was booked rather than a straight-up Hero versus Claudio match. But I guess if you really want to squint, you could say, look, these guys used to be tag champions recently. The one half of the tag champs, the guys that beat them for the tag titles, is Daniels, so they get kind of a chance to get revenge on him.
It happened in this building, and Gabe likes to kind of have consistency when he's booking specific towns.
Yeah, so there's a few things about this, but this match turned out to be more of a handicap match than a 3-way, didn't it?
Yeah, I would say this is like a match where it's a backdrop to story drama between Hero and Castagnoli. With and Daniels, yes, we kind of can just explain why he might be in this match, but really Daniels could have been anyone in this match. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they could have just put a body in there to be beaten up by Hero and Claudio. And yeah, this is a total storyline match where, first of all, the entrances, I counted, took a full 9 minutes before the opening bell finally rang. Because, first of all, Daniel's entrance always takes a long time. And then the other two also kind of took a long time. And, the idea is that the Kings of Wrestling split up a couple shows ago, but they didn't really have like a breakup. It was just sort of, Sweeney came, he said, I'm the agent of Hero. His future doesn't involve Claudio. Hero walked away. They didn't get into any sort of fights or anything. But so they don't hate each other. At least Hero is trying to convince Claudio that he doesn't hate him and they need to work together. And Sweeney's arguing with Claudio a bit, and they're not really fighting each other. They're just both working over Daniels. And like Hero's kind of doing his comedy. Like there was a point where Claudio hit Daniels with a loud European uppercut and Hero shouts, "Oh my God, I'm glad that wasn't me." And they do some of their double team moves. And then there's a moment where Claudio breaks up a Hero pin attempt. And that gets Sweeney mad. And, eventually the Kings of Wrestling go for the KRS one, and Daniels escapes and uses his momentum, and he flings Hero into Claudio, and that's when he makes his comeback. And then there's a spot where Daniels goes to dive onto Hero on the floor, but Claudio pops up into the big European uppercut to stop him from diving onto Hero. And Sweeney breaks up that pin, and that gets him and Claudio into it some more. And then finally, Claudio gets into an argument with Hero, and that allows Daniels to come off the top rope with a double flying clothesline. And, Daniels, he does a pretty good comeback. And he could get some more moves on where he's locking in a move on one of the Kings of Wrestling, and the other one breaks it up. There's actually a really cool kind of like head clinch suplex thing that he does on Daniels for 2. And then a cravat suplex or I guess a cravat buster, they call it, which also gets a 2 count. And there's also a spot where Hero does a discus punch where he calls it out by name. And actually, I was at this show, and this is one of my vivid memories of the show. It was actually louder live, where he spins around and he yells, "Discus punch!" And I was like, that was one of the highlights of the show. You could hear it on the DVD, but it was much louder in the building, and it was very funny live. But I can tell you all the moves, but they keep going back and forth basically, and eventually Claudio accidentally clotheslines Hero after Daniels ducks when Hero holds him up, and then when he goes to the top rope, Claudio does. Sweeney trips him, causes him to fall, and Prazak on commentary questions if Hero saw that. And Sweeney celebrates on the apron. Daniels grabs him by the collar. And while Claudio is distracted, Hero sneaks up from behind, gets him in this crucifix pinning combination, and gets the win. So from my perspective, it's hard to watch this match and not think of it in 2020s terms in terms of the discourse now. Like, when I was watching this match, my main thought was, if they did something like this with these 3 wrestlers of this talent in AEW right now, and this was the match they booked, people would go insane about how, like, oh, what a waste of a match. This was all sports entertainment bullshit. This was like, these guys could have had an awesome 3-way. Instead, they did all this storytelling and didn't really do the match they could. And it was hard for me to get that out of my mind while I watched it. It was like, this got over, the crowd was reacting, it progressed the story, and some of the action near the end was pretty good. But these were 3 great wrestlers that, instead of doing a really cool 3-way match, just did a 15-minute handicap match, which is too long for any handicap match, and did a bunch of story shit. And it's like, maybe in 2007 that played better, but watching it with 2024 eyes, it just seems like a waste of time to me. That's sort of how I felt about it. I don't know if that's unfair or not to look at it through a modern lens that way, but that's just how I felt. It was like, why can't we just have these 3 guys do a match? But instead, they mostly did an angle.
Matt, I think you are as fair and as wise as King Solomon. I agree pretty much completely with you again on this one. It was more, I wrote in my notes, it was more focused on being a story beat than a great match. They tell you it's a 3-way, but just like they promised me those sweet kisses of the feet, they don't really give you a 3-way. I mean, by the end, it becomes it a bit more, but most of the way, it's the handicap match you described. It's Claudio and Hero taking turns doing moves, occasionally doing a double team. I will say I admire the restraint they had to, a lot of times when you want to like drag out a feud, the temptation is you want to make it a long time before the 2 guys even touch each other for the first time. And they found a way to work like a nearly quarter of an hour 3-way match, and those 2 guys didn't intentionally hit each other the entire match. Like, I think they collide 2 times because like Daniels throws one to the other, but they do not, despite the fact that they wrestled for like nearly a quarter of an hour in the same match, they do not burn that moment yet.
Yeah. That's why I feel like kind of like almost being unfair, despite what you said, because I do think the booking was really good in some ways for what they were trying to accomplish.
And like you talked about too, where there are a couple times where Sweeney and Claudio get into it, like that part at the end where Sweeney basically cost Claudio the match when he grabs him. But like you mentioned, you're not really sure if Hero's aware of it. And it's always, it's not Hero and Claudio and Sweeney ganging up on Claudio. It's clear at this point in the feud, they're selling it as Sweeney really hates Claudio and Claudio in return really dislikes Sweeney. But like Hero doesn't have that hatred for Claudio yet, which, is an interesting kind of way to prolong the feud before they actually get to the we're supposed to hate each other part. But yeah, as a result, though, I think you said about great what you said. Like, I probably don't want to see any handicap match, even though handicap squashes can be enjoyable. But you probably don't want to see any handicap match go this long, and I agree with that. You covered most of the interesting spots. I did like, Hero and Claudio did have one moment of tension in this match where Claudio does a drop kick and then a kip up, and then Hero does his all own, and Claudio just gives it a thumbs in the middle, and you can tell, like, by Hero's acting, that really hurt Hero. Like, I love, like, that's the most, like, violence they do between each other is the hurt feelings of a thumbs in the middle. But as a match, I thought this was a little above average. It's 14 minutes is a long time for a handicap match. It's also a long time to just hammer home that same story beat for most of the way until the finish. But overall, it is interesting, like what you said, which is, I think it's the kind of, like, going what you said, this is actually, I agree with you. I think that's a really interesting point. It would get killed in modern, like, AEW or something like that, including people like me who are kind of like, worry that they're going a little too sports entertaining, too much like WWE to some degree. I think it's one of those things where you get away with it, and it sometimes could be even welcome if it's occasional, or also if the big company isn't doing it. Like the reason why I think people would be harder on it in AEW or Ring of Honor is that's not their thing, right? And so it's not just a fear of we don't like this; it's a fear of is this a sign you're starting to ape the larger company? Because if we liked the larger company, we wouldn't be here. We'd be watching the larger company.
Well, especially, coming one night after you got a world title match where Hero's shtick kind of overwhelmed the wrestling aspect of it as well. It's you sort of are getting like a pattern in some of these Hero singles matches where it's a lot of, for a lack of a better term, sports entertainment and comedy. And it's like, people would be much less patient with this now. I think people were just more accepting of the idea, like, oh, this is just what wrestling is back then, even from Ring of Honor. Whereas now it's like, no, we need AEW to be an ultimate alternative that, rejects a lot of the trappings of the history of WWE. Whereas with Ring of Honor, people were, I think, a little bit more patient and less concerned with being so pure because they knew in the end they were still going to focus on these wrestling matches.
And I also feel like Ring of Honor during this period coming off, even if we didn't like some of the end of 2006, coming off 2006, Ring of Honor is probably at like peak fan trust in some ways at this point.
For sure.
Of like, you could do a segment that's a little weird or a little off, and the fans have so much faith because they've seen so much good stuff and they're on such a roll in some ways that's like, we'll be on board. A couple other things I just want a quick note. We talk about like the attention to detail these guys do. I like that Claudio still enters through the crowd, but Hero doesn't, because the difference is, of course, Hero doesn't, because they explained Larry Sweeney got him his own private locker room, being that Larry Sweeney's gimmick is he's like this super agent. But I like that they didn't just, I feel like another wrestling company would have just also had Claudio start entering through, but it's like, no, Claudio still has the same issues and he doesn't have the agent to get him this. So he still had to enter through the crowd on this show. I also loved, maybe my favorite spot in the match was there's a spot where Hero and Claudio, aren't aware that Daniels is coming. You described it where Daniels is coming off the top turnbuckle to clothesline them. And I love that Larry Sweeney had to frantically yell, "Turn around," like 4 times before they turned around. Like, I love how stupid. I just kept saying, "Turn around, turn." And it was like, it almost was getting ridiculous. I love that. And I also felt kind of bad for Claudio in this match in the sense of, Hero had a bunch of fans this show, and really this weekend, it felt like this was a big weekend for Hero where, like, you're starting to get a noticeable amount of the crowd that was like, we know you're a heel, but we like your shtick so much, we're going to cheer for you anyway. And then Daniels always gets a big crowd reaction at every show. And then Claudio, knowing what we've covered on recent shows, how, the WWE thing fell through and how heartbreaking that must have been, I felt like Claudio was like a man without a country from the fans in this match, and you can hear one guy yell at him, "You got fired," and I just felt like, man, like I felt like I could imagine Claudio this weekend. You're probably not in the happiest frame of mind given everything that's happened, and it's like you're kind of like the third man in this match, and a fan's chanting at you. It's like, God damn it! But after the match, Hero leaves in celebration, and Claudio and Daniels are left in the ring. Claudio tells Daniels it was a fair fight from my side, but Daniels is still pissed and just leaves. And so we're continuing a bit of that Alex Shelley post-Generation Next style story where Claudio's like a man without a country that they started with at Final Battle, where, Claudio tried to be friendly with Samoa Joe, and Samoa Joe just told him, get the fuck out of my ring. So again, attention to detail where this idea of, Claudio was against these guys. He was the guy who kind of made Daniels look like an idiot at the 100th show, where he was the first guy to shake Daniels' hand, and Daniels kind of gave him that honor. And then Claudio immediately turned on Ring of Honor that night. Claudio feuded with Joe during the CZW ROH feud. So it's something a lot of companies forget, which is the idea of Ring of Honor at this time was not forgetting the idea of these stories happened, and, guys instantly don't become friends again just because something happened. But that brings us to our last man standing match. Jimmy Jacobs, scored to the ring by Lacey, defeated BJ Whitmer in 15:47 after Brent Albright put Whitmer through a table with an exploder. Yes, so there was interference in this match. People were still waving their cell phones for Jimmy's theme for this match, even though his theme is now Kiss to Kill, which is not exactly cell phone waving music. And
it's not a power ballad.
Exactly. Yeah. And BJ runs out from the back and hits Jimmy with a chair before he even gets to the ring, and the match is on. So I liked some of the recent tags matches in this feud because they had a really chaotic, frenetic pace and a lot of big ideas. This match, to me, went in the opposite direction. Like, for most of the way, it's very straightforward, and due to like the last man stipulation, the nature of how those matches kind of have to be worked, its pace is much more measured. So what I mean by straightforward, I mean like, it kind of like the opener, it does exactly what you think a standard last man standing match in a feud would do. Like, both guys blade early. In fact, I think Jimmy Jacobs bleeds almost immediately.
And he blades twice, I think.
Yeah, like there was a lot of, as Bryan Danielson might tell kids, ketchup in this match. There was double ketchup in this match. And so then they go into the crowd early, like you think a match like this might. There are a lot of chair spots, like chair shots, including an unprotected one to BJ's head late in the match, throwing chairs at someone, being thrown into chairs in the crowd. And then, as you might also expect for this feud, this Jimmy Jacobs spike comes into play. It becomes a central part of the feud, so it comes into play in the match. And yeah, you get a bunch of spike spots. Like, that's what gets BJ to blade. And all of this up to this point in this match, I thought it's fine enough. It's exactly the spots you'd expect in a match like this. Nothing less, but also nothing more. But then you also have the pacing, and it's that last man standing match pacing, which people love. I don't know if anyone loves. I know people that hate it and people that are more can give or take or leave it. I'm more take or leave it. What I mean by that is, like, it's a last man standing match. It means there's a lot of do a spot, and then the match kind of has to slow to a crawl because we have to do the slow 10 count, and then the guy slowly stagger to his feet, and that cuts both ways. Sometimes when you see a huge spot and you have the big pause right after it, it could really hit home the enormity of it and make a big spot seem even bigger. And then there are other times where doing a lot of 10 count spots in a last man standing match can kind of slow the pace down and make it feel draggy. And I do think this match does lose some of that frenetic, chaotic feel because they have to do the 10 count spots. And, there were times where I was thinking I would love just to see these guys turn to each other like in a really fast 10 minutes. And, a last man standing match generally is not going to be that kind of match.
We sort of got that. We sort of got that at the last New Jersey show, that brawl that was sort of ended in, like, kind of prematurely. So, we've seen both from them.
Mm-hmm. And we do get three fantastic standout spots in this match. And in a last man standing match, to me, sometimes you live or die on having a few of just those big, kind of memorable, brutal, now it leads to a 10 count spots. The first is BJ brainbusters Jimmy onto an open chair. It crushes the chair a bit. It looks great. It's a fantastic spot. So fantastic, my complaint is Jimmy barely beats out the 10 count. He almost immediately is now back on offense. And I was like, I wish he had kind of been on the ropes longer. But he has to get up and do his big standout spot of the match, which is they wrestle and they get to a point where Whitmer is not on the ring apron, but standing on the ringside timekeeper's table that's right touching the apron. And Jimmy is in the ring as BJ is standing there, and Jimmy runs. He does a running spear through the ropes to Whitmer that's sitting on the table that drives them all the way back to the barricade. And I thought, that's just a great looking spot. I thought that just looks awesome. I kind of wish they had spaced them out a bit more because they're so impactful, but I also get probably why they put them both so close together, because they're trying to do standard wrestling psychology, which is you backload the match with your biggest spots. But and then we get a really cool spot where Jimmy goes to spear Whitmer in the ring. BJ hits him mid-spear in midair with a chair to the head. Again, really cool looking spot. And then we have the finish, which it's another finish I hated, Matt, where BJ hits Jimmy with a superplex. It's a very good-looking superplex. They get a nice ringside camera angle on it. Jimmy really gets tossed across the ring on it. But that's the spot that they choose to make it look like Jimmy's not going to answer the 10 count, where like they get to 9, and then Jimmy's not even close to getting up, and BJ stops the ref's count so he can keep inflicting more damage on Jimmy. And I just felt like, in a match where we saw the chair shots and the brainbuster in the open chair, having the one spot that Jimmy couldn't answer be a superplex seemed kind of ridiculous. And I know you can make the argument it's about the total cumulative damage of the entire match, but I would have much rather they just switch places where the superplex is the spot that Jimmy gets up from, and then he does the spear and recovers fairly quickly, and the brainbuster on the chair is the spot where you go, oh shit, he's going to lose, except BJ wants to keep beating him up. But then on top of that, then you get to the real finish, which is BJ goes to put Jimmy through a table that's been set up in the corner of the ring, and that's when Brent Albright hits the ring to attack Whitmer. And this is the part I really hated, where my interference, this is the middle chapter in a feud, so it's not the blow-off. So you can have interference to keep a feud going like that. And it continues the Albright-Whitmer side feud that started up. In fact, it sets up a tables match those two have on the next show. It even makes sense from the standpoint that Albright's actually been like explicitly a hired gun from Lacey and Jimmy lately. But what doesn't make sense is why he comes out to save Jimmy 15 minutes into a match where Jimmy has taken so many big spots and so much punishment. Like, if you're going to interfere, why save him at this point and not, say, 30 seconds earlier when he was not about to answer the 10 count on the superplex, or after the brainbuster on the chair? And the non-kayfabe answer, of course, is they wanted to let these guys have a full-length match where they got to do everything they wanted to do before they sullied it with interference at the end. But it just adds this layer of fuzzy logic to the match where it's like, a last man standing match, more than most matches, allows you so many opportunities to interfere. It's no DQ. You don't have to wait for a ref bump. And with all the 10 counts, there are so many times where, like, it's not like a guy where, I didn't run out for this pin because it happened in a flash. It's like with 10 counts, if you see a guy's in trouble, you have time to run from the back and get there in time. So overall, I'd say this was a good match. It had annoying parts of the last man standing matches, and it had good parts of a big no DQ match with those big brutal spots. Overall, I enjoyed it, but there was flaws to it to me.
Yeah, I also really didn't like the ending. I'll talk about that in a minute. Given what you said about last man standing matches, it's interesting because, those kinds of matches can have that kind of, overly methodical pace where things seem to stop dead in its tracks whenever they do these counts. But there have also been some really spectacular versions of this. In AEW, it seems like Hangman Page is like a master of these matches. He had probably the two best ever in 2023, right?
Yeah.
And so you can do super memorable, amazing versions of this, or you could do kind of slow, kind of, I don't know, maybe dully paced versions of a last man standing match where every 10 count, kind of just slows the match to a crawl, and it's hard to get any momentum. I don't think this was the latter. I think this was a pretty good version of it most of the way through. I think what it was lacking was a bit of heat from the crowd. The crowd's intensity did not match the wrestlers' intensity. I guess I'll say it that way. It's not like they were quiet or they weren't into it, but they were probably not reacting quite to the degree that that Jacobs and Whitmer were hoping they would. But they definitely were brutal in this match. I mean, Whitmer was just chucking chairs at Jimmy's head pretty early. There was a spot early on where Jacobs wails Whitmer in the head with a chair, like to the point where it stays on his head, like when Dreamer hit Raven with that chair in ECW. And
Mhm.
to this day, it's still hard for me to watch those chair shots to the head. I mean, I don't know. You don't want to excuse any horrible things people did, but it's like, God, some of these guys, their brains couldn't have gotten out of this era unscathed. You know what I mean? Given
Yeah.
all of the crazy headshots that they took. But it gets more violent. We hear the Spike stuff. There is a spot where Jimmy asks Lacey what to do, and she's just like, spike him in the face. So he actually interrupts a 10 count to spike BJ Whitmer in the face some more. Like you said, there's that brainbuster on the open chair, which sounds and looks brutal and gets probably the biggest pop of the match. And then, yeah, you get to the finish, and I agree with you. Like, it's besides the whole, like, why'd he come out so late? It's also annoying to watch a brutal gimmick match that ends in a bullshit finish, especially when you sort of had that earlier on the show too.
Yeah.
The McGuinness versus Rave finish wasn't quite as bullshit as this one. I wouldn't call it a screw job, but it wasn't satisfying. And this was even worse because these violent gimmick matches are supposed to be definitive matches, but that come down to the two people that are involved in the match. And also, beyond just the fact that it was screwy, I also don't know if I like the idea that Whitmer is about to get up and Albright's allowed to just kick him back down and that doesn't interrupt the count. Like, that felt extra screwy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's the one part I did not describe for those who don't know. So, Albright like drags Jimmy to his feet. He hangs him over the top rope to prop him up. So basically, like Jimmy was not even going to be able to get back to his feet ever if not for Albright. And then BJ tries to get at a 9 count after Albright puts it through the table, and Albright goes to him with a running boot. But BJ basically, I don't know if this was supposed to happen, but BJ basically like collapses to the mat right before the boot's about to hit. So I don't know if we're supposed to think the boot hit or not. But yeah, again, that's another thing where it's like, we just had a match where the ref was like, well, it's an I quit match, but I'm going to protect the guy. And then we have a match where another gimmick match where the ref is just like, well, I guess this third guy can basically win the match for one guy. I'm like single-handedly. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I did like the match. I think these guys work really well together. I think that if this match had a more satisfying finish, just like in the opener, I would have thought this was really, really good. As it is, I thought this was entertaining and ultimately unsatisfying.
And I guess like you made a good point, like bringing up how it's similar to the opening match, and they kind of have the same problem, right? Where they're both matches in long feuds where they're not ready to blow the feud off yet. So, but they've done so many singles matches that they want to keep it fresh. So they do a gimmick match, but then they also don't want to give you like a clean win. So you kind of get this gimmick matches with unsatisfying finishes in some ways, or at least finishes that aren't completely clean. Because I realize people might not mind the opener finish, but the other thing we talked about the other day about on the weirdness of Lacey being back after they did that whole storyline where BJ accidentally stabbed her in the face with a spike that he was trying to stab Jimmy Jacobs with. And then, Jimmy cuts the promo about how she's disfigured and Lacey misses at least a couple shows. And then she comes back and looks fine and acts fine. And we talked about how that was kind of weird. Well, commentary tries to account for that because on commentary during this match, they talk about how like Jimmy said Lacey was scarred for life, but she clearly looks fine. So that's just like another one of Lacey's lies. So they're trying to make it, again, like just, I appreciate they try to make it like, hey, it's just another manipulation of hers. She probably told Jimmy she was scarred or Jimmy's lying about it.
I heard them say something a little different on commentary. Maybe they did say that and I missed it, but they also said it just shows you how messed up in the head Jimmy Jacobs is that he thinks of her as scarred for life, even though she's clearly not.
Yeah, either way, they might have done both. Even I can't even now remember, but like maybe I was hallucinating. I've been pretty out of it the last couple of weeks, Matt. But it is either way. It is again. It's another appreciated thing that they at least tried to kind of tie that loose end and be like, oh, she isn't scarred for life, is she? Like, let's at least talk about that for a second. And then so after the match, also Albright for the second straight time he's encountered BJ Whitmer blows both his nostrils on Whitmer. This is great show for bodily fluids. You got the blood, you got the vomit, you got the stuff. But after the match, Albright says, "Let's kick his ass," and he continues to attack BJ as the crowd chants Colt Cabana, who comes out almost immediately with a chair to chase Albright, Lacey, and a still nearly comatose Jimmy Jacobs away. He still has to actually be carried to the back by Albright out of the ring. In fact, the last moment we see of Jimmy Jacobs on the show is Albright is about to carry him in his arms through the curtain, and Jimmy, still bloodied and screwed up, blows a kiss to BJ as he's being carried through the curtain, which I thought was kind of a neat moment. And the crowd chants for Whitmer as we cut to the next match. And that match, Matt, is finally, speaking of loose ends being tied up, I know we've all been waiting for this, Matt. Finally, the 2004 feud is reawakened. It's put to the end. The Briscoes of Jay and Mark Briscoe defeat the Havana Pitbulls of Ricky Reyes and Rocky Romero in 16 minutes and 4 seconds when Jay pinned Reyes after hitting a Jay Driller. Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, Ricky Reyes may not be back anytime soon. And that would prove true, Matt, because this would be Ricky Reyes' last match in the Gabe Sapolsky era of Ring of Honor. He'd have a few minor matches for Ring of Honor in 2009, 2010, and 2012, but this is it for this run. And this would also, according to Cage Match, which, sometimes they miss matches, but according to Cage Match, this would be one of the final Havana Pitbulls matches anywhere, period. In May, they work a PWG double shot, including a match against the Briscoes. And then a week later, they work an IWA Mid-South double shot. And in June, they have one more match in PWG against Pac and Roderick Strong for their PWG tag titles. And that's it. That's the end of them as a team that have been together in some form on and off since 2000. So we're actually kind of getting to see this is kind of interesting where it's not just the end of an era in Ring of Honor. We're kind of seeing the end of an era for a team that was around for more than a half decade here. What do you think about the match?
Yeah, and also worth noting that Ring of Honor continues to not use the term Havana Pitbulls. They're just the Rottweilers here. They never mention Havana Pitbulls at all on this. Just like I think the only time they might have used the term Havana Pitbulls was when they first debuted before they were part of the Rottweilers, right in that first match against the Briscoes. Mm-hmm. I think they used it then, but really not after that. And I know that you were never a fan of their 2004 run, and we both thought that their match against the Briscoes in 2004 was a bit overrated. This match, I think, suffers from different problems than the first match did, which is I think that match had a decent amount of hard-hitting intensity, and this match I don't think really has intensity, even though they tried to start it in a hot and heavy way, like the Pitbulls. They attacked the Briscoes during their entrance. They're fighting on the floor. Mark clotheslines Romero over the guardrail into the front row. Although unlike some of the other matches on this show, they do not brawl in the crowd, but they do brawl around ringside. So they go pretty fast early, and then things settle down. So they try to start with intensity, but it can't sustain. And I think part of it is it's weird to me that they put this match on before intermission instead of the last man standing match, because usually they end before intermission with their most intense, wild moment of the first half. And This was definitely taking it down a notch in terms of drama compared to a couple of the earlier matches on the show. I almost wonder if maybe this should have been the opener, and Nigel versus Rave should have been the match that closed the first half. I guess it's a minor thing, but just made me think, because this match really didn't have much heat at all. And considering it's the Briscoes, that was surprising to me. But I guess because maybe this version of ROH, the crowd just felt no connection to Ricky Reyes and Rocky Romero as a team. It had been so long since they had been together, and also so long even since Romero had been in ROH at all. But, it sort of suffers from some of the same stuff that the Briscoes matches suffer from. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Doesn't really have a lot of flow to it. They do the double Beal on Reyes early. Get some decent height, but given Reyes is a pretty big guy, does not get the amazing distance that they get sometimes. They do some spots where the referee won't count because the wrong man is in. At one point, the Pitbulls work on Jay for a little while, Um, and like there's a spot where Jay comes back after the Pitbulls kind of get a little bit of a miscommunication. They're deciding which ropes to bounce off of, and so then they hit the ropes, and Jay hits a double clothesline, and then Mark gets the hot tag and hits some of his big moves, sunset flip on Reyes. And Ricky kicks out. Mark turns it right into a buckle bomb, which I thought was a pretty cool sequence. Um, there are some other things I found weird also, by the way, were I realized that Julius Smokes in this match was basically working as a heel manager because the Pitbulls were sort of working as heels here, which is kind of strange because Homicide's clearly a babyface at this point, and he's the manager of Homicide, so that was a little weird. As far as the action in the match, I also like the spot where Reyes hit this really nice bridging back suplex, a move that you don't really see too often. There's a spot where Mark kicks Romero to the floor, goes for a springboard moonsault, but Romero pulls him off the ropes, gets into the ring, and hits a tope. There's also a spot where Jay does the military press Death Valley driver on Reyes, and Romero breaks that up. Romero gets a cross arm breaker on Jay, and then Reyes simultaneously gets one on Mark. So they kind of have the double submissions on, but Keener breaks them up because someone in each of those combinations is illegal. So they can't count either of the holds. Then there's a spot where the Rottweilers go for almost like a doomsday drop kick, but Jay gets Reyes in a victory roll, and Romero falls to the ground, and Reyes kicks out. And then suddenly, Romero and Reyes start arguing and get into a shoving match, and Romero just suddenly walks off. And there's really no reaction to that because the crowd, like I said, has no connection to the idea of Reyes and Romero and the Rottweilers being a unit. So they don't care that this person that they don't really think much about is walking off. But while Reyes is distracted, that's when Jay hits a Jay Driller on him for the win. And Romero looks in the camera and says, "I don't need that shit. I can win on my own. I don't need any of these motherfuckers." Which was a good in-match promo, but again, doesn't get much reaction. What I think is funny is that Romero says, "I can win on my own." And then as we see in the future, that's a setup for him to join a group. He joins another faction after he declares he can win on his own, which we'll see in a few shows. But I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, this match was kind of boring. It just didn't have a lot of intensity. The work was, I'd say, fine, even good at some points. There were some cool spots, but this was probably the least entertaining match of the show, at least so far. And that's unusual for a Briscoes match.
So first thing I want to ask you, because my memory always is not good, during the match, commentary tries to hype this match up as tying a loose end, with the Briscoes getting potential revenge on the team that ran them out of Ring of Honor in 2004. But in storyline, wasn't it low-key kicking Jay in the head after a Briscoes versus Homicide and Key match?
Yep.
Testing the limit?
Yeah, wasn't there was only one actual 2-on-2 tag match between the Briscoes and Reyes and Romero, right? And then
there was the 6-man too,
yeah,
but
right,
right. Just in terms of straight up 2-on-2, I think it was just
the very first match that the Pitbulls had. So yeah, the beef with the Briscoes and the Rottweilers was more with Homicide and Low-Key, and obviously the Briscoes have worked against Homicide a billion times since they came back. And Loki's not coming back, so they can't work him. So I guess the idea is this is the last of the Rottweilers that they need to get their revenge on. I guess if you want to, stretch logic for that, that's probably what they were trying to convey here.
I appreciate Gabe trying to make the effort, but again, it is one of those things where, like, if you were a fan long enough to remember, it kind of these two guys weren't the guys that ran them out. But yeah, like you just said, the one guy that did technically in storyline run them out of Ring of Honor is a guy Ring of Honor doesn't want to book anymore, so you can't have them get revenge on him. Like you said, I've never been a high voter on the Havana Pitbulls' work as a team in ROH, and I thought this match was okay. Like, a little above average. It's kind of the all action of modern Briscoes back and forth, like you said. You do a spot, I do a spot in the first section, and then they actually try and give it a bit of structure in the middle when the pit bulls isolate Jay and they actually play heel. They're frequently distracting the refs so he misses tags, and at one point Smokes just brazenly yanks Mark off the apron as he's about to get tagged. So yeah, like you said, Smokes has, even though he's technically the manager of the top face act in the company at this moment, is playing complete heel here. I thought Mark looked really good on this night. Like, he was really sprightly, zipping all over the place. And there's a few spots in this match that don't quite look great, and there's a few spots that look really cool, like a springboard twisting sunset flip that gets turned into a buckle bomb. There's this great looking spot where Reyes has Jay on his shoulders for the Doomsday Device, flying knee from Romero, and it's that spot you described late in the match, and Jay reverses into a victory roll. And anytime someone does a Doomsday Device, gets reversed into a victory roll, and the guy crashes and burns spots, that's a spot I'm just a sucker for. That might have elevated this match for me from average to above average, because I'm just like, anytime I see that spot, juices the match rating a little bit. I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. And it's the second straight match with a finish I don't like the finish you described, because it's after that spot, the victory roll spot, Rocky gets up and he's pissed at Reyes, and the commentary tries to act like they collide with each other, but they didn't. The whole spot is, Reyes has a Briscoe on his shoulders. The Briscoe does a victory roll, and so as Romero is flying midair, and so Romero doesn't hit anything. He just hits air and crashes to the canvas. And this is, they could call the show Battle of the Icons. I think what they should call the show is I Get What They Wanted to Do, because that's what I've been saying so often during this show. I keep saying it throughout the show, because I get that the whole weekend was about splitting Romero away from his old Rottweiler stable and reestablishing him. And, so they wanted to do a spot where, they break up the Havana Pit Bulls. But it was such a weird spot where you could have booked any spot where they actually collide with each other. Where Rocky gets legit, instead of a spot where it's a complete airball. It's not Reyes' fault here. You could have booked a much more clear spot. And it's another match on the show where it seems like every match on the show has not had like a really satisfying finish, other than Adam Pearce and Pele Primo, where it's like, the I Quit match where the guys doesn't say I quit, or a last man standing match ends with interference, or a match here where it's kind of or a three-way that's really a handicap match that has a manager interfere to cost a guy the win. And now here it's a match where it's, again, a very sports entertaining type match where the two guys, this is not necessarily sports entertaining, but it's a match where it ends with not with one team just being completely the best over another. It's a guy gets mad at this guy, walks out, and the other guy's outnumbered and he loses. But I thought it was a passable match. I think you made a great point about the match order, where, yeah, this would have worked better as an opener in front of a crowd that hadn't seen anything yet, where it's kind of a weird choice to have the show not even be at the halfway point, and you've already done two different no DQ violent gimmick matches in hot notable feuds in the company. And then you're putting this match behind them, which has no gimmicks, and its whole thing is, hey, remember that feud 3 years ago that was not, you weren't that into it then? Like, yeah, that's a tough position to put a match in. And then, yeah, like you said, after the match, Rocky says into the camera, I don't need that shit. I can win on my own. I don't need any of these motherfuckers. And like you said, Rocky within months is part of a stable, so clearly he did need some motherfuckers, just not these motherfuckers. Ricky Reyes, he's not an untalented wrestler. He has some talent. He wasn't, I wouldn't say like it's a great loss for Ring of Honor, him leaving, but I did feel slightly bad where, like, this is his right out. Like, he doesn't get booked again during the Gabe era. He doesn't even get, like, they don't even book him for like a Romero Reyes blow off match, a quickie feud, one match feud. Like, it's like the last thing you see of him is his longtime tag partner being like, fuck you, I don't need you anymore. And then him taking a fall, and then you never see him again. So I was like,
when a booker decides they don't want to use a talent anymore, do they notably, especially in mid-card talent, do they notably give them satisfying send-offs usually?
Yeah, I guess not. You have to be at a certain level to get the satisfying send-off. Not everyone gets the final countdown, but We get another airing of the promo for the upcoming 5th year festival series of shows. We've seen this promo probably 4 or 5 times at this point, but luckily, Matt, it's a decent video, but this will be the last time I think we'll have to see it because the 5th year festival starts with the next show. And then we go backstage during its intermission where new Ring of Honor interviewer Rebecca Bayless is here at intermission. Rave barges in and says, Jimmy Rave barges in. He says he knows what is on everyone's mind. Why did he put the heel hook on Samoa Joe last night? And I thought, after that match tonight, Jimmy, I don't think like the Samoa Joe heel hook is what's on everyone's mind. It's probably like, what did you eat? Are you feeling okay? But anyway, Rave says he put the heel hook on Samoa Joe last night because Joe slapped him in the face at Final Battle and disrespected him. Rave says when Joe did that, he'd crossed the line. And Rave says now that he's dealt with Joe and he calls Nigel McGuinness ancient history, he says the only thing left for him to do is to set his sights on the world title. So
at least he didn't seem sick here.
Yeah, he got a little. Someone had some crackers and ginger ale for him backstage, hopefully, and he's on the mend. But So just setting up the world title match on the next show. And then we come back for intermission with Colt Cabana and Sarah Del Rey defeating Brent Albright and Lacey in a mixed tag in 13 minutes, 20 seconds when Del Rey pinned Lacey after hitting a butterfly lock slam. I thought this match was completely off tonally. On the last show, we had a mixed tag with some of these same people in it where Daisy Hayes got a legit concussion and a giant goose egg on her head. And afterwards, Colt Cabana cut this promo that I think we both legitimately thought was fairly good, where it was this intense, serious promo about how, even if it was a little ridiculous that we've talked about how people selectively get mad at man-on-woman violence in this company and in this feud. Colt cut this decent promo about, you've crossed the line, Jimmy, you've raised things to a new level, I'm not putting up with this anymore. And then the very next night you have this match that Colt wrestles like he's wrestled a million matches. Like, yes, you can tell he's mad at Lacey, including like before the match, you can hear him say, I'm going to fuck you up too, bitch. Before the match, he says that to Lacey, which unfortunately gets a crowd pop in 2007. But in the ring, he's doing his usual mix of stuff. Like he's doing his standard spots. He's doing a bit of ridiculous comedy with Brent Albright. Like notably, there's a spot where Colt gets on all fours and he demands that Brent wrestle him Greco-Roman style. And Brent kind of wants to, but then he gets psyched out by the position. And then eventually this leads to Colt, Brent, and the ref, and eventually the crowd all shouting in different tones. This is wrestling at each other over and over again. And I actually thought all of them saying over and over again was kind of funny. But again, is this the right match to do that kind of spot?
Is that also the debut of a very famous chant?
It might. I don't know if that chant started in ROH. That might have started more in like a place like Chikara, where. But
before this.
Yeah, I'm not sure. See, here's the thing: I'm wondering if this is wrestling always started as like an appreciative, like this is the real shit chant, or it was kind of an offshoot of a different chant. Because there was a chant in the indie wrestling. Probably before this match, probably like predating this match, of wrestling, yay, which was a very smarky, like, oh, we've seen a headlock kind of cutesy, ironic chant. And
right, but this is wrestling became a chant of like you said, this is the real shit. Like this is wrestling, not that other bullshit, right? But obviously this is a different context. I think it's possible that this is the first time that was chanted. I can't prove it. Maybe someone can correct me, but I think it's possible.
It very well might be, but either way, the other issue I had with this match, I think, was the man on violence. I'm just trying to jog my memory. Like, I have no idea if this was supposed to be an old school mixed tag where the genders were rigidly kept from hitting each other. It seemed that way at first, but by the second half of the match, like, men are hitting women. Both members of a team, both genders combined are doing double teams together on people. So it gets completely abandoned if it was considered to be part of that match. And again, Colt, for a guy so pissed at a woman getting hit the night before, doesn't have a problem here taking a few shots on a woman today. Like some, granted, are pretty minor, like Lacey's charging across the ring at Sarah Del Rey and Colt just sticks out his foot and trips her. But this feud is still in a weird space, I felt, watching this match, where when it comes to man-on-woman violence, where at times ROH wants you to be outraged by man-on-woman violence when a heel does it, but when a face does it, they kind of want you to cheer it. It's so, and sometimes it happens in the same match where don't get mad at that man-on-woman violence, cheer for that one, but then boo that one. And it's kind of weird. the wrestling itself is very mid-tier. I thought Del Rey and Lacey looked good enough against each other, but they didn't really get like a large block of uninterrupted time to really get into a flow. And Cole and Albright's work together was pretty minor again. The tone felt kind of all over the place. Like it felt crazy watching this match to realize that technically the people in this match are part of the same feud that was earlier in the night, the BJ Whitmer Jimmy Jacobs match, which is, far more violent and brutal and intense. But I did like one spot where Albright hit Sarah Del Rey with a backbreaker, and then he held her in that position, and Lacey hit her with like a punt kick to the back while she was still in the backbreaker position. I thought that was kind of a cool double team. I liked Lacey doing the splits because anyone doing the splits is physically impressive to me. Like I did the splits once when I was a child, Matt. I sprained my groin and tore the crotch of my gym pants and never tried it again. So anytime someone does the splits, I'm just like there for the grace of God. I can't do it, but you do it. I appreciate you doing it.
Give it a try right now. See how it goes.
Okay,
live on the air. Maybe you can. Maybe you've grown as an adult. I mean, literally, you have. So,
but overall, I would call this match barely average, I would say, and again, weird tonally. What'd you think about it?
I maybe liked it a little more than you did. Like, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, the tone was weird, given that it's part of that same feud, and yeah, the man on woman violence aspect. It's like when you see ROH doing a match like this, you sort of know in advance where it's going to go because they don't do that, complete separation of genders where, the men and the women don't interact physically. So, in advance there's going to be uncomfortable stuff. If you're willing to overlook that, you can see some of the stuff in this match that worked. Like, I mean, the crowd was more into it than they were into Briscoes versus Romero and Reyes. That's for sure. Like they did enjoy what was being done in this match. And in a vacuum, the stuff with Cabana and Albright was pretty amusing. It's kind of funny that in an ROH 2007 match, the stuff with like the actual like more entertaining and hard-hitting wrestling was being done by Del Rey and Lacey, which obviously, like nowadays, that wouldn't seem weird at all to have the women have a better wrestling match. But in 2007 ROH, that still seemed unique. That the women were kind of the more athletically focused part of the match, and the part that were providing more of the hard hitting wrestling action. They just didn't get a chance to do that so much back then. And Cabana and Albright really focused a lot on the comedy. And like, you put the, you explained the this is wrestling part, which I did think was very funny. There was also the part where Cabana, when he got down on the mat, he first yelled, "Let's go amateur, baby," which I think is a pretty good way to announce that you're going to go amateur. And there was also a spot, like you mentioned, where Albright felt tentative about engaging Cabana in this amateur baby wrestling, and he yells, "Stop it!" And then someone in the crowd, or I think it was someone in the crowd, maybe it was Lacey, I don't even know, but they yelled, "What's he doing?" And Albright yells, "He's shaking his butt." And I thought that was pretty funny. And then we get an Albright likes it chant, to which he responds, "I do not like it," which on the scale of ROH 2000's homophobia is pretty minor. I think that was a fairly amusing segment of the match, even though in some ways this is like the second comedy match on the show because they were doing a decent amount of weird comedy stuff in the Hero match too. But I thought all that was fine and entertaining. And then once it broke down into the more normal tag team match, I thought Lacey's heel work was good. I liked the part where she held Del Rey's hand out to Cabana and yelled, "Tag me, tag me." She thought she did a good job. I liked Albright and Lacey actually doing a double wheelbarrow, double knees to Del Rey. I thought in some ways the work was pretty good. And then, I was surprised that Del Rey won with a completely clean finish, given that, she's not a part of the roster at all at this point. And I guess she was a last-minute replacement. Didn't you mention something on the last show, like she
No,
wasn't
they said
actually?
that was always the plan. That Daisy Hayes did get legitimately hurt the night before, but it was always the plan to do an injury angle on that match because Sarah Del Rey was always booked for this spot.
It's kind of weird though. Like, why would she have been? She doesn't really fit in. And once she does become a bigger part of the roster, she's not really in this position, right? She's a
Yeah.
heel with Larry Sweeney, right? But but anyway, in the end, I thought this was a basic enough but entertaining match. I would describe it as a low ambition match that met its goals.
You know what? That will also make me like the match more because that's how I describe my life. It's like a low ambition meets its goals. But after the match, Daisy Hayes runs to the ring from the back, speaking of Daisy Hayes, and her head's taped up from the night before. She grabs the mic and she says, last night, Lacey called her a stripper after their match. She says, I don't think so. I'm not the stripper. You're the stripper. Daisy says, here's a tip, and she takes out some dollar bills and throws them at Lacey. And then she says, here's some, and she says something unintelligible I can't make out over the live mic for later too, and stuffs some down Lacey's top. And Lacey rolls to the floor.
No, sorry, finish. My fault.
I was just going to say, Lacey rolls to the floor, and as she sells, she nearly redeems the entire match and the entire segment, maybe the entire show. This might be my favorite thing of the entire show, where after, Daisy did this to her, Lacey just shouts, free money, and she grabs a loose dollar bill. And I just thought that's a great heel reaction. Like, instead of like, oh, I've been humiliated, it's like, ha, serves you right, loser. I've got $2 now. Like, I love just the way she shouted, free money. Like,
but isn't she a rich businesswoman?
Yeah, that's a good point. Huh.
That gimmick was very inconsistent. But I was going to say, I'm going to make the summary judgment that, as far as I can tell, neither of these women are strippers. In fact,
No.
I would describe them both as professional wrestlers.
Exactly, fighting women's athletes, Matt. Mm-hmm. But also during this match, it seems like the loudest crowd reaction is the crowd getting into it with Lacey for something, and at points they chant Lacey spits, Lacey swallows. I think at one point they chant Albright swallows. If you wonder why, we'll go to the live report. This is from a Michael Mansfield PW Torch live report that he sent in. He wrote, while this match was going on, Lacey spit on a fan who was harassing her earlier during the last man standing match and was continuing to berate her from the crowd. He was a jerk and he deserved it. In the end, Del Rey pinned Lacey. Daisy Hayes then hit the ring and took the mic, calling Lacey a stripper and throwing crumpled bills at her. After the match, Cabana gave the dollars to a few kids in the audience. So that's nice.
Didn't it seem like Lacey was actually giving some money to people in the audience?
Maybe. Well, you would think of the Lacey as the heel, wouldn't? I mean,
yeah, I know, but I thought I saw that.
It's maybe she. I gotta rewatch this now. Actually, you know what? I'd never have to rewatch this ever again. I don't have to do anything, Matt. But
I'm not going to make you.
That brings us to the semi-main event. Austin Aries, Jack Evans, and Roderick Strong defeated Davey Richards, Delirious, and Shingo in 20 minutes and 2 seconds when Aries pinned Shingo after hitting the 450 splash. Jack gets a nice welcome back chant from the crowd because this is, again, his first weekend back after months away. He goes, and it's good to be back, people, before the match. And he does a break dance like usual. And then Delirious is doing his usual crouch motionless in the corner with his arm outstretched bit so people can fist tap him. And Roddy then decides to jump on the turnbuckle that's behind Delirious and hold his tassels like reins. And then he calls Jack over and has Jack ride him like a horse as Delirious stays motionless. And at this point, Aries decides to walk up and have it so Delirious's hand is like right by Aries' crotch. And what I love is the crowd is into the rest of it. They boo that. They're like, okay, you could pretend to ride Delirious like a horse. Don't get sexual. This is a bar too far for us, Austin Aries. And then when the bell rings, Delirious runs around and he rants to Jack Evans and Delirious Ease about what happened. And Jack just says, you know what? That's true, and I apologize. And he shakes his hand. And I thought, I love Jack Evans, and I love that too because that is such a Jack Evans thing. Like, it's just like he does apologize. Like, there's no trick to it. He's just like, okay, you know what? That's a good point, Delirious. I apologize. But that might have been my favorite part of this match. What does that mean for my opinion of the entire match? We'll see. What did you think about the match?
I mean, I think it kind of tells you something about your opinion about the match. Well, first of all, one of my least favorite parts of the match. So they do this like, when they have teams join up, they sometimes in ROH in this era would do like a mashup of their music, and they did this with Evans and Aries and Strong, where they had the little preambles be the same, where with Roderick Strong, it's, it was a firefight, and with Aries, it's reach out and touch me. And with Evans, it's this, I don't even know what it's quoting, but it's somebody talking and talking about, and well, anyway, whatever it was, this little preamble included the use of the N-word multiple times. And it was like, I'm a skinny little bleep battling bleeps 3 times my size. And it's like, I don't know. This is not a wise choice for you to include this as part of your music, Jack Evans. I don't think that it's suitable, for anyone, but definitely not you. So, that, excuse me, I just sneezed. That was a little bit odd, but as far as the match, I did like the match. Like, I thought it ended up being very good. I think that it was not all that it could have been, because basically this is a trios like moves match. It was in Dragon Gate rules, which means everybody can come in whenever someone else got out of the ring. But the problem is that it's also one of those ROH matches where it felt like a switch was flipped 5 minutes before the end, and everyone was like, okay, now's the time for us to get intense and serious and do all the cool stuff. And the first 2/3 of the match were lesser in different ways. Like, the early part of the match had a lot of comedy, between the spot that you talked about. And then there's also a spot like where Delirious and Shingo both do a like growly bicep poses, and then Richards comes into the ring to also do a bicep pose, and Delirious looks at him and goes, no, 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 no. To which Davey responds by just kicking Evans down again, and then that gives Delirious, that Delirious approves of that. Like, yes, you can kick, but you can't do a bicep pose. Like that kind of comedy. It was enjoyable, but it didn't really add to the match, I would say, tonally. There was also a spot, like, also when you get Delirious acting pretty silly at the beginning, in the match, which I think also kind of is like, all right, a little bit too much comedy on the show, I think. There's a spot where, actually early in the match, where Evans works with Delirious, and he's doing some cool agility moves and head scissors. And Leonard says on commentary that Jack Evans is as quick as anyone you will see in the business. And I'm just thinking, like, Jack Evans is not fast, but when you think of Jack Evans in this era, does speed come to mind first and foremost?
No, and like, he's not Masato Yoshino, obviously, but like, even close to that. Like, Jack Evans was a smoker, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. I can say that by my own eyes. I saw that. Yes.
Like, I would imagine, Jack Evans. We're big fans of Jack Evans here. Great high flyer. I imagine if you did like a cardio like race with everyone on the Ring of Honor roster, he might not be in like the top third. Maybe. I wouldn't put money on it.
I mean, I don't know, but I know that speed wasn't his calling card.
No.
Back in this era. It was like high flying and agility and stuff and stretchiness, but not necessarily speed. I'd say Aries, if anything, is the speed guy on that team. But anyway, the moves are good. I'm not going to read off all of them. They do some good stuff, but then like there's a spot where they end up going outside. And like Shingo drops Evans' neck on the guardrail. Before that, Evans went for a space flying tiger drop head scissors, and Shingo caught him and swung him to the guardrail, which is honestly one of the best spots in that early part of the match. But everyone's on the floor, and it just gets weird because everyone just basically falls into a heap, and they all kind of sloppily fight around ringside, and like there's no rhyme or reason to it. And I kind of thought that odd sequence hurt the match's momentum because that sequence started with that really cool counter on the space flying tiger drop. And then it turned into this just like kind of like mass of just like people flopping around. And then back in the ring, the crowd was quieter than they were before. So I don't know what that was supposed to happen outside, but it didn't seem to go the way they wanted it to go. But shortly thereafter that, they kind of do flip that switch. It happens, as it often does, when Roderick Strong gets hot tagged into the ring. And so when that happens, He hits a slingshot suplex, tags in Aries, hits a frog splash. They hit the chop brainbuster combination on, but Delirious breaks that up. Delirious does a panic attack on Aries, and Shingo hits a spinning gut wrench slam, gets the 2 count off that. Evans catches Delirious up on top, and Aries comes up too, but Richard takes him down, and then Richard ducks a roaring elbow, and then runs up the ropes to do a released German suplex on Evans, who's still on the top rope. And then Delirious is also still on the top rope and hits Aries with the Shadows Over Hell, gets a 2 count there. Then Shingo's hits Aries with a big lariat and goes for a pump handle driver, and Strong breaks that up with a low running sick kick. Then Strong hits a pump handle suplex on Shingo. Then Strong fireman carries Delirious, but Richards drop kicks him and throws him to the floor. Then Richards and Delirious do stereo dives onto Aries and Strong. Then Evans goes to the top rope, but Shingo stops him, and Strong gets Shingo on his shoulders, and Evans does, in another really cool spot in the match, an ode to the Bulldogs moonsault all the way to the floor onto Richards, who's off of Shingo, who's being held up by Strong. And then back in the ring, Strong and Aries hit their double team combo with the kick to the head and the Alabama slam into the 450, and they get the win. And then Prazak calls it the show-stealing match of the weekend. I wouldn't go that far. I think there was a lot of really cool stuff near the end. But like I said, I didn't really like how the tone just was shifted so dramatically at the end, where it was like that switch flipped. I would have preferred a more consistent tone. You can't knock the athleticism of those final spots, so I think in the end the match was good, but I don't think it held together as well as some of these other exciting, I guess I would say, Dragon Gate style trios matches that we've seen.
I'm kind of relieved to hear you say that, because I thought if you liked this match more, I was going to say maybe I'm just crazy, because looking at like everything else, maybe this match is just a match that didn't age well or something, because like I'll go to the Observer from Dave talking based on live reports. He wrote, the shows this weekend were said to be the usual good ROH shows, with the best match by far said to be Aries and Strong and Jack Evans defeating Davey Richards and Delirious and Shingo of the entire weekend. And I would not say this was the best match, let alone the best match by far.
In fact, I don't think that I thought that even live. Like, I don't remember this match leaving a big impression on me, honestly.
Because I've seen even people like after the fact just look at reviews afterwards, after I rewatched this, like people have given this like 4 stars plus, this match. So people do like this match. It's not like well remembered, but people who've watched it seem to like it quite a bit more than maybe you or I do right now. It's not a bad match, but first off, it's yet another I know what you're going for, but match where we had Generation Next split up the year before in 2006. And then we had, not only after they kind of already announced they split up, then we had like their official farewell match last year at Generation Now, a show that they literally named for that match, where they kind of exited how they entered with an 8-man tag, except this time instead of being the 4 young guys that are the 4 rookies in that 8-man tag that are breaking in, they were the established veterans facing 4 young prospects making their name. In fact, they lost to the prospects in that match. And just to jog people's memories, the 4 people they lost to in that match were Davey Richards, the Irish Airborne of David J. Christ, and Jarrell Clark. Matt, it's only 6 months after that match, and the only person on the future prospects teams that is still even in Ring of Honor is Davey Richards. And he's in a match here basically in the same spot, and he loses this time, his team. So it's kind of weird to just randomly have the 3 non-Alex Shelley founders of Generation X get back together for a random tag. But I get the idea, probably from Gabe, knowing his plans are to give each guy their own stable and have them feud with each other for most of the year, try to remind people like, hey, this is one of the greatest stables in Ring of Honor history. Remember them. They're still kind of chummy, and then we're going to break them apart. Unfortunately, booking-wise, it kind of creates a match where you kind of wonder why it's happening, and I felt like they kind of worked it at that level. Like, I don't think anyone was mailing it in this match, but there's a lot of talent in this match. It's the semi-main event on an Ring of Honor A show in a significant market on a Saturday night, and I think it just ended up being like a solid, good match. Like, nothing you'd go out of your way to see, but kind of consistently enjoyable for the time that it's on. I also thought it was somewhat notable that Roddy had a feud with Shingo months earlier, and he was currently in a feud with Davey Richards, a fairly heated one over the FIP title that boiled over into Ring of Honor recently. And there's no real hate in anyone's interactions here. Like, you would never know watching just this match that Roderick had just had a feud with Shingo and is in an active feud with Davey Richards. Like you mentioned, even like the playful comedy spots in this match. But then we move on, and eventually, Jack Evans plays face and Farrell like you'd expect for a match like this, and he makes the hot tag. And like you mentioned, this is another one of those many Ring of Honor matches where it feels like in the final 5 minutes they just flick a switch and decide, let's try and up the ante a bit here. And the match was not bad before that, but it is like one of those, let's turn the switch in the final 5 minutes. And like you, to me, the two spots that were standouts were the space flying tiger drop into the round on the floor that Shingo caught and then swung Jack into the barricade. But on that spot, I will say the one thing we disagree on, I really like the brawl on the floor. It wasn't a great brawl. They didn't do anything particularly special, but I just liked in a match like this where I've seen better versions of this match before, this kind of style of match with some of the same people. I was just like, at least there's something different. Like just for a minute that there's this weird brawl on the outside. And I get what you're saying, that maybe the crowd didn't appreciate it, that took down the crowd. It's not what you expected. It wasn't particularly great. I just liked the variety because it was one thing in this match that I did not expect. I was like, I did not expect a mid-match brawl out of nowhere. But it only lasts about a minute, either whether you liked it or hated it. It's only like a minute of this match. And then, the Ode to the Bulldogs moonsault to the floor, I thought was a great spot right near the end. And again, this was a good weekend for reestablishing Jack Evans and reintroducing him. Not that I think a lot of Ring of Honor fans needed a reintroduction to Jack Evans. But the one notable thing I thought about this match was Austin Aries appeared to get seriously fucked up in this match. Like, if you want to see a guy gutting his way through a match, watch this match, because Delirious hits him with Shadows Over Hell, and immediately Aries starts screaming, oh fuck a lot, and he's clutching his face, and then for the rest of the match, he's limping. And for the rest of the match, he's slow to get up. Sometimes he's limping, but he gets through the rest of the match. Like, he does the spots he needs to do. At one point, he and Roddy are on the outside about to get hit with stereo dives to the floor, and you can see Roddy and hear him literally like lean over to Aries before they're about to like catch these dives and say to Aries, like, are you okay? And Aries seemingly just tells him like, yep. And Aries, even though he's limping for the rest of the match, he even does the 450 he needs to do at the end for the finish. And in fact, immediately after the match, when they're all shaking hands, if you listen closely, you can hear Delirious in a serious, somber, kind of sheepish, in-character Delirious voice say sorry to Aries as he shakes his hand. So whatever happened there, I looked back, I couldn't see exactly what happened. Whatever happened, Delirious knew it happened. He felt bad about it. But yeah, overall, just it was a good match. It just, for this level of talent, I don't think it was as great as a lot of people seemingly at the time, or some people seemingly thought.
I have a question for you. Do you think that spot where they did the bicep poses and Delirious was like, no, you're not part of this, do you think that was intentionally foreshadowing the fact that Davey Richards was going to turn heel on the next show and be like, oh, I'm not being taken seriously enough? Or do you think it was just a cute comedy spot?
I think it was probably just a cute comedy spot, but ROH did pay attention to detail and stuff like this. But I think it was probably just a cute comedy spot based on the fact that, like, of the people on that team, who's the guy you would think would be, like, most deserving of doing a bicep pose? And the idea that Delirious is like, no, you can't do it. Like Shingo and Delirious, have good bodies, but, like, Davey was pretty jacked, and the idea of him going, no, we don't want to see a bicep curl from you. Like, no way. Also, you talk about sign of the times. We just had a show recently where we talked about, I think it was like Final Battle, where someone like booed Umaga or screamed fuck Umaga during a Samoa Joe promo, and Joe had to like talk them down, be like, no, Umaga, like, good for him. And you have a spot here where Delirious shouts Umaga and hits Austin Aries with the thumb to the throat. Like, Umaga was definitely like the topic of conversation for a few months in like late 2006, early 2007, where it seemed like everyone was referencing him and had to have an opinion on him in the wrestling sphere, one way or the other. But yeah, so that's the match. I'm just scrolling through my notes quickly. So yeah, immediately after the match, Aries is talking to Roddy and the ref. You can see he's hurt. Aries then gets up limping as they celebrate, and when they all shake hands, that's when Delirious apologizes. And that's that. And when we then go backstage where Colt Cabana is standing, he says, enough of the drama, enough of the games, enough of the emotion. He wants Jimmy Jacobs at the 5th year festival. It's going to be a celebration of Colt's fist to his face. I thought he had enough of Jimmy last show, but apparently he wanted a little more comedy before he had enough of the emotion and the drama. But that brings us to the main event, the ROH World Title match. Homicide, scored to the ring by Julius Smokes, successfully defended his Ring of Honor World Title when he defeated Samoa Joe via pinfall in 24 minutes, 22 seconds after he hit 4 straight lariats. First of all, Matt, I have a major, major bone to pick with this match. This is the match that gives the show its name. It's called Battle of the Icons. And in fact, you can hear commentary multiple times during this match talk about how both men's are icons of Ring of Honor and who's the biggest icon. We're going to find out by the winner of this match. Now, long time through the years listeners, deep vein thrombosis, and real deep ROH addicts will know this. But in 2004, ROH had, on a show called Scramble Cage Melee, there was a 3-way match between Homicide, Samoa Joe, and CM Punk, and it was first fall wins, and Joe, who was the Ring of Honor World Champion at that time, did not put the title on the line. And I guess seemingly, probably, since Ring of Honor was like, well, the title's not on the line, how do we give this match some kind of stakes? We're searching for anything. They added a very goofy stipulation where the winner of that match would be known as the icon of Ring of Honor. And it was a meaningless stip that we made fun of at the time, that I think probably fans made fun of at the time, made even more meaningless by the fact that basically Ring of Honor immediately dropped it and never really acknowledged Homicide, maybe after one show, that he was the icon of Ring of Honor. But here's the point, Matt. They could have called this show anything, and it's Battle of the Icons. Homicide already won a match over Joe to be the icon. How could they do that, Matt? So, I am outraged.
Trevor, how do you say that you have a bad memory when you remembered that of all things?
Who could forget the match to determine the icon of Ring of Honor match?
I did.
It's the icon of Ring of Honor match. It was so important. But
I think, like a lot of things, Trevor's self-deprecation about his memory is also not actually backed up by facts. Trevor has an encyclopedic knowledge of Ring of Honor, everybody.
Not since this tradition continues was the show that Ring of Honor broke the man on one violence streak. Have I been so outraged by a title of a Ring of Honor show? But
they should have had you being the continuity editor of ROH, because you would have come up with a Battle of the Legends,
anything else, anything but that word,
Battle of the Tippy Top Guys, as people like to say in wrestling. Which now, so I feel like somebody can name a show that, right? Now that I've put that out in the ether.
I hope so. I mean, we know people in the indie wrestling business. They could definitely, if they have the balls to do it, they'll put Tippy Top in a wrestling show title. But on paper, this should be a big match, right? Like, Homicide versus Samoa Joe was one of the big feuds in the early years of Ring of Honor. Their match at Do or Die in 2003, I think, is one of both of our favorite matches of that year. And even though these two wrestled each other like a million times in 2003 and 2004, I actually looked it up. This I needed some help with. My memory was not perfect here, Matt. They hadn't had a singles match against each other since Death Before Dishonor 2 Night 1 in July of 2004, which means this is actually their first singles match in 2.5 years. And more than that, like, the story's completely flipped, right? Where when they feuded before, it was always Joe as champion, Homicide's challenger. Homicide usually has the heel, and Homicide's never beat Joe Homicide did beat Joe in a non-title match, but he never has beaten him up to this point in a match where the world title was on the line. And so now here, Homicide's the champion, and he's the babyface. Joe is the challenger, and the two had just spent a few months as a duo in a new friendship. So you have like an old feud that hasn't had a match in a long time with a new context, and it's one of the worst and weirdest matches I think these two have ever had against each other. Like, you ever have that thing where you meet someone and something kind of goes, for any, not just a date, it could be anything, and something kind of goes wrong, and it's not wrong enough where like, oh, I've completely soured any potential of like making a good impression on this person, but you're at a deficit and you're gonna have to work like double hard to dig yourself out of the hole that you're in now. This match feels like the entire way like it's in a deficit, and they never quite dig out of it to me. Like at the start of the match, before the match even starts, Homicide gets rattled by a fan. Like someone is heckling him. We can't hear it before the match, but clearly Homicide does. It's enough, whatever this person is saying, for Homicide to grab the mic and say, "Do not make me jump over the railing and piss in your mouth, you fucking F slur." And then the match starts, and the fan must keep doing something because Homicide again grabs the mic and says, "This is the wrong fucking company for that bullshit. Now shut the fuck up." And like Homicide is rattled here. And then they wrestle for
He
a
also
while.
mocks the idea of being a good guy. He's like, "Oh, I'm a good guy. Fuck being a good guy." Like it was definitely getting off on the right foot.
Yeah, exactly. And then they wrestle for a while. And it's kind of some parts of it are slow, and some parts are little bursts of wrestling. It's like it's they're wrestling like it's going to go for a while. And then something even weirder happens. And in fact, this might be one of the weirder things we've seen in 133 years of Through the Years. 133 episodes, not 133 years. It's almost that much.
Yeah, I mean, it was about 133 years. Let's be honest.
So at one point in this match, and I posted a clip of this a few days ago on Twitter because I just couldn't believe rewatching it, just what I was seeing. At one point, this match stops, and everyone in the crowd and the ring are completely looking at something in the crowd that the cameras initially don't see, and you go, like, what the hell's going on? Even commentary has to acknowledge it, because sometimes when the crowd does something weird, commentary ignores it. Even commentary can't ignore this. And we eventually see it's Julia Smokes at ringside getting into it with two big old grandmas. I mean, maybe they're not grandmothers, but they're women of age, Matt, that look like women of age in the traditional sense, white hair. And they're either leaving or getting ejected. They are flipping Smokes off and telling him to kiss their ass. Some fans are briefly chanting grandma. There's a brief "we want grandma" chant later as the fans again seemingly get distracted by something we can't see. And I just tried to look up who these women were. What's the extent of this? All I could find is these two things. From The Observer, Dave wrote in The Observer, the next night, Homicide pinned Joe in 24:58 after 4 lariats in a disappointing match. An old lady at ringside kept flipping off Homicide and basically took the crowd out of the match. And then Michael Mansfield in his PW Torch Live report wrote, the actual match itself was very good, but Julia Smokes really ruined it for the audience. I don't know if it will come across in the DVD, but Smokes kept getting into it with 2 older ladies in the audience. It was actually quite funny as they were giving him the finger and screaming at him. Joe and Homicide stopped fighting to watch, and the crowd chanted, "Granny's gonna kill you." It wasn't as funny the second and third time and really took away from the match. The crowd seemed fixated on Smokes when they should have been watching the fight. Their attention was on the Smokes Granny altercation during the pinfall. There was no pop at all for the finish, as everyone just seemed surprised that it was over. So, Matt, do you have any memories, like you were there live, like did these women get ejected? Were they there to the, like, how, like, because on watching on DVD, you only really get the gist of it, that one segment. But how much of this do you remember? Was this a factor?
I really don't remember because I think I was sitting like all the way in the back on like the other side of the ring. So I think I probably like heard a commotion and heard the chant of grandmas, but I don't think I really saw what was going on. It did seem like Smokes was distracting and a distraction, and I feel like this is not the first time that's happened, and it's bad timing to do that during a big main event. I feel like he could have acted differently and maybe like, you know, kind of de-escalated the situation and not engaged as much, and that would have detracted less from the match. Because I do agree that it detracted from the match, and I do also agree that it seemed like Smokes was stoking it more than he needed to.
Like any match can have something like this happen, something that just the fans do, something that distracts fans and wrestlers. It happens, other fans and wrestlers. It happens all the time. But to me, it always affects matches like this more because a world title main event is supposed to be a big deal. And if everyone in the building is getting distracted and their attention stolen by for an extended period of time by 2 grandmothers, not only does like that distraction itself hurt the match, it makes the match feel smaller. Like you'd like to think in a giant match, nothing could distract the fans away. A grandmother could have taken off her shirt and bit the head off a live pigeon during Rock Hogan at WrestleMania 18. I don't think anyone would have noticed. And this
Right. In a big match, you're supposed to get the impression that the crowd is just as engaged in it as they would be engaged in like the 9th inning of the World Series, where the score is tied. You know, like it's something like that.
Exactly. In a battle of the icons, this, as some would say.
Battle of the tippy top guys.
And look, I'm not saying this match is Rock Hogan. I'm not saying this match is a tippy top guy match like Rock Hogan at WrestleMania 18, but it's supposed to be. It should be a significant match, and it feels like it doesn't, and that's part of it. Not all of it, maybe. I mean, we'll get to their work in a second, but I do think that's part of it where. The crowd getting so distracted by two grandmothers and even everyone in the ring getting distracted by it. It's like that alone to me kind of makes the match feel smaller.
Well, it's also like let's be fair. It's not just them. Like the
No,
homicide was very distracted by something else. I don't think he was using the F slur on those two old ladies. So I think there were other things going on, like besides just that. So, and I don't think that helped whatever the tone was. It seemed like homicide getting so I guess for lack of a better term, gotten to um, early on by the heckler was, like I said, they got the match off on the wrong foot.
I mean, think about it. Like this is a match. This is a show that started off with Samoa Joe telling Homicide, "I just found out like this is the last chance I'm ever going to get to become Ring of Honor World Champion again." And then in that match, the entire thing gets derailed by two grandmothers. Like
But again, I'm going to say it, not just them. Like there's obviously
yeah, yeah. And
more than that
Homicide,
going on.
Homicide's reaction, Smokes. You're
Homicide,
right. You're
Homicide
right.
was clearly like frazzled from very early on, and then Joe was pretty professional about it. But there was even a point where the crowd was chanting something. I don't know if that was when they were chanting grandmothers, like later in the match, where Joe, you clearly see on his face him just going "fuck it," and he just like puts Homicide in a chin lock. Like
Yeah.
he was giving his best effort to stay stoic and just be focused and not let the distractions take him off his game. But even he, at a certain point, had enough, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that moment too. I almost took it as like a Joe acknowledging, like sometimes I've seen that happen in matches where like if you feel like the fans are like completely stealing focus and you can't get back, you just kind of give up and be like, we're just gonna put you in a chin lock and ride this out until they like this resolves itself.
I think
But
it actually, when we can, I think it actually kind of worked. The crowd did start chanting for Homicide shortly after he did that. So it's a good pro move by Joe.
yeah. So all that's to say, I think even if the distractions hadn't happened, which is obviously one of the biggest stories of the match, I still think this probably would have ended up as one of their worst matches against each other. Like watching this match, I felt like there were so many interesting directions this match could have gone in, and they don't really commit to any of them. This match to me was like it was like you watch a car at a four-way intersection, and any of the four roads lead to good places. And instead of going down any of the roads, the car just does circles over and over, donuts in the middle as two grandmothers yell at them. And like you could have had Homicide be the underdog. He's coming off the biggest babyface moment of his career 2 shows ago. He's facing his ultimate rival, a guy he's never defeated in a title match. So you could have had Joe dominate him and then Homicide fight from underneath and pull out the win late as an underdog. And Joe does take it to Homicide a bit early and work on his back, but they never really fully go down that road. It's not a match where Homicide is dominated. And then Homicide later, he does a huge move to Joe. He does not one but 2 pile drivers to Joe on the concrete floor. Joe, in the moment, sells it big. He's screaming in pain at the ref like, don't stop the match. Please don't stop the match. You rarely ever see Joe take a move like that anywhere, let alone 2 in a row, let alone on the floor. Nor do you see Joe selling that big, that frantically, like Joe being in danger like that. That's very rare. And it's really interesting. It's Joe almost in the underdog position in that moment. And that's another road this match could have taken. You could have had Homicide basically show, I'm the front runner now. I've grown as a wrestler. I'm more than your equal now. I'm going to beat you in a match where I really take it to you. But they don't really go down that road all the way either, because Joe sells the move big in the moment, but pretty quickly he's back trading stuff. And in fact, at one point, Joe even puts Homicide in a torture rack. And as much as I love when Joe breaks out the torture rack, which is like a rare treat, if you just tried to sell that your neck was nearly broken, a move where you're stretching a guy over your head and shoulders that you almost never do seems like an odd choice to me. And just again, like there's so many things they could have done. Like most Homicide and Joe matches have been Homicide as a heel and Joe as a face. At this point, ROH, they're both faces. But you could have had one play more heelish for the night and then make up with a post-match handshake and a hug. And like you were talking about earlier, like Homicide early on is kind of an asshole. Like you mentioned, he said, I'm not a good guy to some fan. He, at one point when he's selling that his fingers hurt, he he pulls off his glove or whatever and then flips off the camera and the fans. Later, after he does the pile drivers to Joe, Homicide just grabs his tail and tries to leave before he stops, which again is a very almost like cowardly heel move. Apart from those moments, Homicide doesn't really play heel. Like there's 3 or 4 moments, but again, this match doesn't really commit to anything. There's some cool spots we can get into, but for time, I want to get to you soon. But I will just say, I appreciate that they teased the Joe doing the muscle buster off the turnbuckles late, which was the finish to the famous do or die match, but this time Homicide avoids it, and then that starts like the finishing run. But overall, I just felt like this match wasn't these two guys' day. It wasn't quite clicking. They were swimming upstream the whole time. I've rarely seen a match between two wrestlers with this much chemistry where they were working fairly hard. I didn't feel like they were mailing it in. They weren't at their absolute peak, but it just felt like they weren't able to get into a groove. And in the final minute or two of this match, where things should be like reaching that fever pitch and hitting that last gear, you see Homicide, he just starts trying to throw headbutts and Joe Samoan. So they do the spot where Homicide sells and Joe's head is hard, and then Joe throws his own. And the crowd seems so much more down than they were for the rest of the match. And it just feels like a moment that you would see in the first minute or two of a match, not like the final minute or two. And it just feels like a match that in so many ways, like it's just limping to a conclusion. I couldn't believe that a match between these two guys has that feeling where it's like the crowd is getting deader, not more lively. And it's just like you're getting through it. Even that finish where, they're going in this lariat war and Homicide finally wins with 4 lariats in a row. It should feel epic. And it just feels like, well, that's over. And on commentary, Lenny Leonard is screaming. He's trying to he's overselling more than Lenny does, because Lenny usually doesn't do that. And he's trying to make it feel epic, but it just doesn't. And selling it so big actually makes it feel even lesser. Like, because it just emphasizes that it's not as big as you're selling it, dude. And overall, I would call this like a barely 3-star good match, because I feel like these two guys, kind of like Danielson Joe matches, are so talented. I think their floor is pretty high. But man, this was tough sledding, and it never really got going.
See, I had a very negative memory of this match because it was pretty disappointing live. So I would say I definitely like this a good bit more than you. Like, I think it was still disappointing, and I would also say it was their worst match. But like, I remember you said that you gave the Homicide versus Hero match from the show before 3.5. I think this was definitely better than that match. Because it just felt more fitting of a world title match, but maybe not much better. Like I put that at 2.5. Maybe this one's like at 3.25. And I think, like you said, it was swimming upstream. And I think that first 10 minutes really took it down a lot. Homicide clearly not having his head in the game. The match having all sorts of distractions. But once they passed that moment, I thought there was some pretty good stuff. I thought that sequence on the floor was excellent. The 2 ole ole kicks, Homicide throwing the chair at Joe, the 2 pile drivers, Joe yelling at Sinclair not to stop the match. I thought that felt like it could have been a part of a really great match if it was placed differently and the crowd was just in a different mood. I think that the crowd's distraction early took them out of the rest of the match, because that climax that they built to with with the headbutts and the leaping DDT off the ropes and the torture rack, and even the teased muscle buster from the top to tease that finish of their do or die match against each other. I think those were all really smart things to put in the match and felt like they could have been part of a pretty epic match. But with the way the crowd was and the way the match flowed and the way the night was, it just didn't all go together. I think that on paper, the finish was really well laid out. Homicide needing to hit lariat after lariat, 2 from the front, 1 from behind, another from the front to finally take Joe down and pin him. I thought that was a great idea, well laid out. I just think that, like you said, there was just so much working against them on this night. Some of it not their fault. I would say some of it was Homicide and Julius Smokes' fault. I thought that it didn't reach the level of a classic that I do think they were trying to get to with that finish. I think maybe cut out the first 10 minutes, maybe change the order of some of those spots a little bit, and you might have had a better result. But it is what it is. I do think it's kind of interesting that even though Homicide seemed like he was in a really bad mood during this match, right before he goes through the entrance, he looks at the camera and says, "Doug, this is for you. Rest in peace." It's like he was still obviously feeling emotional about that. Maybe, for all I know, maybe that's why he was in such a bad mood. I don't know how close those two guys were. Um, you never know, but it's all. I feel like it all is part of what led to this match's presentation being what it was, for better or for worse. I guess mostly for worse.
Yeah, and there are some spots I liked, like, I mean, I agree with you that segment on the outside where there's a segment, like you mentioned, where not only is the pile drivers on the floor, but like Joe hits an Ole kick and then goes for another, and Homicide grabs the chair and just throws it, hits Joe hard, like with a hard chair throw. I agree that all of that felt like that could have been in an epic match. Like, it's funny. Some people might look at this match because it's remembered as a disappointing match, and they might think it's late stage Joe and ROH. Maybe he's mailing it in. These two guys weren't mailing it in, I don't think. I think you would agree there. Like,
Yeah,
I do agree. Like, they were trying to have a pretty great match. And yeah, the Homicides and Smokes dealing with outside forces kind of just dug them a hole. There was a neat spot. I really liked Homicide broke a double knuckle lock where he dropped to his knees while he was in the double knuckle lock, and then he started scooting backwards on his belly until he got all the way under the bottom rope to the floor, and then that just broke the hold. I thought that's a really neat way to break a double knuckle lock. And stuff like that, I really appreciate. It's like, hey, that's a neat little thing. I like there's a moment where you mentioned the great, DDT off the turnbuckles. Joe goes for the ST Joe, the STO to when someone's charging him in the corner, and Homicide rolls through it, and then Homicide immediately climbs to the turnbuckle to try and fly, but then Joe catches him like in midair with an STO in the middle of the ring. And again, I just thought, okay, you guys are doing some like putting some thought into some like neat switch ups. I like that Joe worked over Homicide's back, and then later in the match, he does his big boot and senton that he usually does, but instead of doing it to like Homicide's front, he does both to like Homicide's back, which again, there are a bunch of neat stuff. Maybe I undersold this match a little bit because when I look over like my favorite parts of this match, there are neat parts of it, but I think why you mentioned, I liked the Hero match more than this, and you think this match is way better. In some way, like as a wrestling match, this is a better match, but I feel like the Hero Homicide match that we saw the night before, it got completely derailed early, but it became something else. And I enjoyed it for what it was, which was just the one-man hero show. Where this, I felt like it was harder for me, even though there was in some ways better wrestling in it, for me to enjoy it as much, because I felt like it was fighting, like you were said, there are moments of a great match here, and that almost makes the parts that aren't great more frustrating. Like it's more inconsistent, like to see that you're seeing something, well, oh, this could have been great, and it's just gotten completely sidetracked in a way that kind of hurt my enjoyment of it a little bit, where it sounds like maybe you could appreciate it more for what was there, where I was starting to focus on what wasn't there. But you can hear a fan at one point say, "You're a bad James Brown impression at Julius Smokes." And I was like, is he? I don't think he's a James Brown impression.
No, I don't really see that correlation at all.
But after the match, they play Ballin' again, like they did after Homicide won the world title.
We Fly High is the name of that song, which I got incorrect way back in the day, so I have to correct you now.
Oh, and I got to remember I forgot. The Jack Evans N-word thing. You're wondering where that came from? That is from a Tupac song that was his entrance music, which is called "The Uppercut." That is Tupac Shakur talking about being a skinny gentleman fighting people much larger than him, as I will say. As we are allowed to say it, Matt. We can't say it the way Tupac says it, nor would we want to. But after the match, Ballin plays, not exactly, or We Fly High, not exactly a Ballin style moment, although maybe it should have been. But grandmother's got a grandmother. Joe quickly goes to the back with no fanfare or even any interaction with Homicide, which we'll get later. But it was kind of crazy at the moment. I was like, they're not even gonna acknowledge each other. Like Homicide Joe just leaves immediately. Homicide eventually walks back to the curtain, and before he leaves, he does what you said, Matt, where he turns to the camera and says, "Doug, this is for you. Rest in peace," for Doug Gentry, who had passed away the day before, which we talked about extensively on the previous episode of Through the Years. And then we go backstage where Nigel McGuinness is doing a promo, staring off to the side. I thought we had escaped it, Matt. It is back for this promo. I don't know why. Only some people are doing it. Anyway, Nigel says that heel hook finish of Jimmy Rave's causes a lot of pain, but Nigel says he never quit tonight. He never said I quit. At the 5th year festival, he's going to finish the job. He then talks about Samoa Joe saying Joe never got the job done tonight either in his match. And when Morishima comes from Japan, he's not going to get the job done against him either. And then we cut to Joe and Homicide sitting together in the building by the ice hockey boards because the Inman Sports Building was an ice hockey rink. After the show, fans are gone. Both are nursing their injuries, trading notes about their match, but clearly getting along and being back to being friends again. Joe says, unfortunately, he failed to capitalize tonight, but now with one priority off of his plate, his sights are set on Noah. Joe says he's been talking a talk and throwing out a lot of challenges lately, and people will soon find out why he's been doing that. He's only got so much time to get this done and get it out of his system. Joe says he doesn't hate Japan or Noah, but he has a score to settle. When Joe left Japan, he left defeated. So now when they leave America, they're going to feel the same. Joe says his time is running out, and in the 5th year festival, bring him Morishima, bring him Nigel, bring him the best. They'll all be broken. Homicide says they can bring any fighters in the world at the 5th year festival. Bring it on. Jimmy Rave will be next in New York City, his city. Homicide says it could be people from Noah, from Dragon Gate, from the Fiji Islands. He doesn't care. At which point, Joe darts his head into the frame and yells, "Fuck Fiji, son!" Anyway, Homicide then says,
Clearly, there must be some feud between Samoa and Fiji.
Anyway, Homicide says it could be someone from Pluto. He'll beat them. He's the godfather of the Rottweilers, the Scarface of professional wrestling. You can call him a disgrace. He doesn't give a damn. That belt is coming home with him. Joe asks Julius Smokes to get him some ice for his injuries, and that's how we end the show. Matt, that was Battle of the Icons. I know before we went into this double shot, you said you remembered that these two shows were kind of another bump in the road before we start getting to some good stuff again. I think we were both pleasantly surprised by Dedicated, the show that we last covered, the first half of this double shot being a little bit better than we thought it was. What do you think about this one on rewatch? I have a feeling it won't be quite the same thoughts.
Well, first of all, should I wait to give out the Matt F. Trophy, or should I?
I forgot the Matt F. Trophy. God, Matt, of course the Matt F. Trophy, the most important thing.
The most important thing. I'm going to give the Matt F. Trophy this time to Jimmy Rave. I really admired his grit and his gumption, clearly being unwell, but continuing to work hard, having one of the better matches of the night, in my opinion, maybe even the best match of the night. So I think he deserves it on this particular night to go through what he went through and still put on the performance that he put on.
Yeah, and I agree. If I don't give away a trophy, that is a sacred, solemn responsibility saved for Matt. But if I did give out a Trevor D trophy for the show, it would be the people cleaning up Jimmy Rave's vomit, because that ain't fun.
That's true. They at least deserve a trophy. Some of them might even at some point get the top of the class trophy for that effort. But yeah, as far as the show, I still think from a work and entertainment standpoint, this was probably better than a lot of those late 2006 shows. And I think it probably got better crowd reactions than a lot of them too. But yeah, a lot of the booking was a little bit sus, as you might say, like just unsatisfying. And the main event clearly didn't come off the way it wanted to. So this was definitely by far the weaker match of the weekend. The weaker show of the weekend, I should say, with Dedicated, I think, being a lot better overall. But yeah, I would say the 2007 vibes don't start in earnest until we get to the 5th year festival. And hopefully those shows hold up pretty well. I do not think that they reach the levels of the Best of the Milestone series, but I think there's some good stuff in there. And I'm looking forward to them also going back to the Manhattan Center, because the atmosphere is always pretty electric at those Manhattan Center shows.
So my thoughts on this show were, I'm going to give this show a review I may have given once or twice, if that ever, on Through the Years before, which is not a good show, but a good podcast show. In other words, like, there's lots of interesting, weird things that happen. Like, I can't remember a show, you mentioned the booking, I can't remember a Ring of Honor show that's had this much kind of weird, questionable kind of, not like like killed the company or anything or thing booking, but like weird kind of off booking. the vomit, the grandmothers, like there's so many interesting weird things that happen on the show that's probably more fun to do a podcast about it than watch it. It's not a absolutely terrible show, but I would call this an easy skip for the most part, unless you want to join the fun of watching just a very weird show that has grandmothers and vomit and so many other things. Like it's an interesting show if you're so deep in ROH that you're watching every show. But if that's the case, then you don't need a recommendation because you're watching every Ring of Honor show. But overall, yeah, Dedicated was definitely the better show of this weekend. And so that brings us to plugs. As always, ThROH The Years at gmail.com, THROH for through. If you want to write us an email, at Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter. We've gotten a couple really delightful messages from people who have been enjoying the show between the last episode and this one that I really appreciate. That always goes appreciated. Not that you have to do it, but just, we work hard for them. No money, and that's the closest you'll ever get to me saying.
One thing I got to disagree with. You have to do it, everybody. You have to.
You have to compliment us.
Everybody write us a beautiful letter.
Attention must be paid. But to quote the great Jimmy Pardo. But with all that said, we will be covering next time on the show. We finally have gotten here to, as Matt has talked about, to the maybe not the best seas, but hopefully pretty good seas, the 5th year festival, a series of Ring of Honor shows as they attempt to copy last year's great milestone series of shows. Every show is supposed to be a major show. We start with the next one, the 5th year festival in New York. Returning to Matt's stomping grounds, Matt continues to just every big show he's at, and whether it's the modern times or past. Homicide, Jimmy Ray for the world title. The incredibly anticipated Brent Albright, BJ Whitmer tables match, but also the big match on the show, Takeshi Morishima, a guy who will be a big player in 2007 Ring of Honor, make his ROH debut against Samoa Joe in one of Samoa Joe's. The match that starts Jamoa So's final run in the Gabe Sapolsky Ring of Honor. We'll start it off with that. We'll start to say goodbye to him with that show, with that match. I'm running out of the ability to talk. So this show is ending right on time. So until then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.